Political prisoner 10359R. Report to Commandant.
Political prisoner 10359R.
Good evening, Premier.
I want to show you a world gone mad, in which we starve a great country into an atomic war. I'm sending you back into this world. We have made a deal for your freedom.
In a last desperate effort to prevent World War III, one man is called upon to succeed where all the world's leaders have failed. That man was once a prisoner in a Russian labor camp.
Do you accept election? You must answer now. I accept.
He is now a pope.
May God have mercy on me.
Starring Sir Laurence Olivier, Sir John Gielgud, Oscar Werner, David Jansen, Barbara Jefford, Vittorio De Sica, Leo McKern, and Anthony Quinn as the first Russian Pope.
We shall be at war within 2 months.
I'm sorry, will you please repeat that?
We shall be at war within 2 months.
The Chinese are preparing for thrust into Burma, Thailand, North Vietnam.
You are walking a moral tightrope.
If this is the last sound made by the last living man, it must be shouted loud and clear.
This would entail a face-to-face meeting with Chairman Peng.
I have agreed to meet him. I am not convinced that he can do anything for us.
Your Holiness is proposing the incredible, the impossible.
You gave me absolute power. You must submit to my use of it.
Words are cheap.
Mr. Chairman, you came because you thought I might be able to do something. Now, what is it?
Pay some of the price that we have to pay. When I came here today, I put my head on the executioner's block. When I go back across that border, it might well be chopped off. That's my risk. What is yours?
When the future of mankind hangs in the balance, what risks do you take? The answer rests with one man. A man who walks in the shoes of the fisherman.
There you have it. Hello. Oop.
Yeah, you need to add it. There we go.
Welcome to Neighborhood News. George Webb investigates with Neighborhood News. Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025. Hey, George. Shoes of the fisherman there.
Yeah. Hey, Super Jew. And hey, Mark, how are you? Hey, Aaron. Excuse me. I sometimes just say Super Jew.
That's okay.
Well, Jordan Peterson's come at us and said we're all psychopaths because we hate Israel. And I do a show with Super Jew. Come on, Jordan. He's on Joe Rogan saying we're psychopaths.
I mean, Israel's anti-Semitic, you know. I mean, there's a lot of which Israel are they talking about? The anti-Semitic Israel that hates itself, or there's or the Baha'i Esperantists that George Soros is aligned with. So I don't know. Do we want to get into that today? The Pope is down. You did a great face this morning. The Pope of a different color. So yeah, let's dive into the Pope to start here, or popes.
Well, and I want to say that Mark chose. He's the expert on papal history.
Mm-hmm.
He chose Shoes of a Fisherman, which is one of my favorite movies when I was growing up, which is about the Pope stopping World War III. So I'll let Mark talk a little bit about Shoes of a Fisherman with Anthony Quinn.
The more things change, the more things stay the same. You remember this movie came out in the midst of the Vietnam War, 1968. Like this is Nixon and Johnson, are going to go to duke it out in November. And actually it was Humphrey, but Johnson was still in the picture when this movie came out.
It was a big production, probably like theaters, the big show in the theater that weekend.
Seat engagements, you had to, you paid a little extra for these, and I think I went with a church group. to see this. And we went on a Sunday afternoon matinee, and it was, oh, you have to go see it. Which, you know, this was kind of, but the church was kind of showing how the church maybe was starting to show the Vatican II a little bit, and the social justice angles. You know, the church had turned the corner. Since I'm not a practicing Catholic, I only can like postulate from the outside, but it had an interesting, you know, of having a, you know, because always have been Italian popes. Okay. And then this postulated back, like, well, what if, you know, had a Russian? We ended up with the Polish Pope. But after like 500 years, that all the popes had been Italian. And also, you know, remember, you know, my mind seems to remember the connection that, well, the Pope is like the successor to Caesar from the Roman Empire, you know, and the College of Cardinals is the Sanhedrin. And, you know, and you notice the little yarmulke that the Pope wears. So there's interesting, you know, just an analysis from the outside of things that have been said. This movie was fascinating because it took you into the, you know, well, we'll get to see all of the, you know, where they burn, it was green leaves, you know, you get black smoke. Well, we didn't elect a pope today, you know, and they keep waiting every day, and then there'll be a fire. And when the white smoke finally came out, we have selected a pope. This whole process of the College of Cardinals, you know, if you want to see the process that's going to, you know, occur here in the next few weeks, this movie will give you like an overview of the whole process of selecting a pope and everything that is done, you know, the ring being smashed and, you know, with the papal seal and all of that. So that was the fascinating thing about the movie is, you know, if you really wonder like what's going to happen, this will give you an overview of the whole process of selecting a pope.
Fascinating.
Yeah. And I remember, you know, with this guy being selected, this Pope coming in, remember there was, see, we can talk about this because this isn't our lifetimes, Mark. And I had a friend who was just so Catholic. They went like every day. And one of my older brothers is Catholic. And I mean, they go to mass every day. So they know what's going on in Rome. Right. And so I remember there was Fish Fridays and things like that and then there was this council that they had put together in 63 or 64, this, you know, diet of worms or whatever, you know, ecumenical council that they'd pulled together. And so the Catholic Church was in its revamp mode as well. And then Khrushchev had kind of been pushed out in 64 because he was going to liberalize things too much with Kennedy, even though Kennedy was dead, Maxwell's silver hammer. Well, we'll get into the bioweaponeering. You know, is the new Pope going to be shoes of the bioweaponeer? We'll get to that in a second. But yeah, there was this declaration. What is 63 or 65?
Vatican II. You know, which
Vatican II.
Little things like, you know, they turned, you know, they brought the altar closer, you know, and would face the people, you know, and it's really Protestantization, you know, of the Catholic Church while they're, you know, Catholicizing, you know, trying to, you know, this whole mushing of the religions like through the World Council of Churches and that to, you know, to I guess bring in eventually like the one world religion. But these were things that were like trying to like modernize the church because, you know, like the Catholics, they have 7 sacraments, but the Protestants only have 2, you know, so, you know, trying to reach into some of these other, you know, doctrinal things to try and just like bring all the Christians into one tent, which, you know, is like herding cats. It's not going to happen. So
I think you're muted, George. Got you on mute, or did you? Oh, maybe not.
Yeah. No. So there's this period of transitioning where, you know, Khrushchev was talking with Eisenhower about, you know, let's limit nuclear missiles. And then with Kennedy, with the partial nuclear test ban treaty, I think they got rid of Eisenhower right away. And they blew up his Paris summit in 60 with the U-2 shoot down to make sure that didn't happen. With Kennedy, they had to blow his head off. They figured there was not long to wait. But Khrushchev was kind of going in this direction of détente. And the the idea was no. The only thing that America understands is the strong hand. Remember, I don't remember when Brezhnev came in, but they were trying to kind of put the clamps on Khrushchev. In the thing that you saw, was it Sir Laurence Olivier was playing the premiere there?
Yeah.
There was this premiere. I think it's a fictional premiere. I think it's Kamenev as a fictional premiere.
Mhm.
And the reason why they went with the Pope from
Russia.
Yeah, I think is because Khrushchev's father. Well, no, wait. Was it Khrushchev? Yeah, Khrushchev's father. One side of his family was in the kulaks. There was some private land owned in Ukraine and so forth, and a little bit of land, but Stalin came in and took all of that. And then there was another side of the family, and this is also true with Gorbachev, I believe. These both guys had peasant backgrounds, where the other side of the family was the one who rolled up all the kulaks into collective farms. So you had to have some peasant sometime become president to represent the people, right, rather than the insiders at the Politburo, right? And I think both Gorbachev was kind of an echo of Khrushchev, and Khrushchev had this. He was from Stalingrad, I believe, where he got his start, and the whole. If you watch Enemy at the Gates with Jude Law, Khrushchev is played by. I'm trying to remember who plays Khrushchev right now, but he's a great actor that plays him as a political officer on his way up in the defense of Stalingrad, which is on the Volga River there. And a big, it's the Russian soul rather than the Russian brain, right? It's the peasant's soul.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then Khrushchev, began the de-Stalinization efforts in Russia. And I would guess that along with that would have been some sort of a purge within the party of, your Stalin sympathizers, as Khrushchev, would probably try to consolidate power. And then I'm wondering if those same forces that he suppressed ultimately brought him down, like in the mid 1960s. Just a postulation, but
we muted you again.
Well, Brezhnev had, this is the very good movie of Enemy at the Gates, which really kind of explains the 25 million people that the Russian people put into World War II. So when we talk about World War II, and I talk about my dad at Guadalcanal and New Georgia and Bougainville, that's every Russian story, right? And 1 out of every 3 men was killed in fighting age men was killed in World War II. So this is what I'm saying is this is so ingrained in the Russian psyche, these battles and so forth, defending, with human wave attacks. And the famous line is, run toward the machine guns, and when the person you're with is killed, grab his gun, because they didn't have enough guns to give out to everybody, so they only gave out guns to Ed Harris does a great job as the German elitist sniper in this movie, and Jude Law plays Yuri Zaitsev, who is this peasant Russian wolf hunter, taught by his father how to shoot, and there's the actor that plays Khrushchev. It's a great movie, but it talks about how Russia is not going to, like, you could take the hinterlands from Russia, you could take Ukraine, you could take Belarus, you could take all these things that are kind of like the hair on a bald man's head away from Russia. Like you were saying, Mark, the Cardinal's cap is where you can't go in Russia. I think Mark's on mute.
Oh,
now I can hear you.
Doing a little camera shift.
Yeah.
Little camera. We're still waiting for that intern. Still waiting for our studio in here to help. So we, doing the camera shift. We had a little off center there. But so if I could summarize your last space this morning, your Pope of a Different Color space, in just a sentence, it would be, it's time to spend the money, right? Next step for the Pope, or the selection of Pope for the Catholic, the Vatican, is it's time to spend the money. Hey guys, we've come this far. Look at our history, the Nazi gold, and in terms of where do they get the money and what money is it and all that, we can dive into that. But you think that coming up next for the Vatican is it's time to spend the money. And, Mark was even telling me how Pope Francis here was a Jesuit, and how he was the first Jesuit Pope. The Jesuits were not supposed to be popes, somewhere in the rules there that they set out so many centuries ago, that the Jesuits were not supposed to be popes because they were going to control the bank, the money. They were going to be the money guys. And so, you were talking all about the Vatican Bank and how that ties in. And it's like, well, I guess the signs are there that they brought in their money man, Francis, the first time ever that they had a Jesuit, money changer. I don't know what they were or how they, managed the money, but
Francis was more of a cover-up artist, not in a bad way, but in a kind of like, hey, let's not go there. He didn't really prosecute the child pedo stuff either. It was just kind of like, I'm going to be so nice and charismatic as an individual, kissing the feet of peasants in South America. South America is going to love me. Everyone in Philippines is going to love me. All the Catholic countries are going to love me. And I think he was kind of the love pope. And I think Pietro Benassi is going to put somebody in here as the gold pope. Go ahead, Mark. I'm sorry, you got something to say.
The Financial Times came up with a new term today, and this could be coming forward in the coming days, and that's what they're calling the MAGA Catholics. People like Steve Bannon, who are Catholic, okay, that they have the Latin Mass, the traditionalist Catholics, okay, who don't like because like this Pope and a lot of this problems all come out of this Vatican II and this turning the Catholic Church, ecumenically and abandoning the traditional Catholic Mass and the Catholic teachings. And supposedly, the scuttlebutt is from the outside that this Pope that is here, has set up, the College of Cardinals to ensure that you continue to have the leftist communist aspect continue in the papal chair. But now you're hearing of these traditionalists, that no, we're not going there. Like they got rid of Ratzinger more because he wanted to re-Christianize Europe, and was trying to become traditional, but they had enough that they sent him away. I don't know why they don't just bring him back and let him finish out the rest of his days as the
Oh no. We don't want the Ratzo. We don't want Ratzo. That's not good. Well, this was not I think this was actually a Greek-Ukrainian, the story of a Greek-Ukrainian Pope, correct, Mark? It's not an actual Russian Pope. What was Lakota? What was his name?
Carol Lakota. I was thinking, could have been Polish too, because it was all in the satellite countries.
Right.
He was in a Russian labor camp, apparently somewhere.
Did this foreshadow Pope John Paul II from Poland, because he's from, it might have been not a Jewish, but he was close to the Jewish camps, to the Nazi camps. It's hard to say, but this could be a foreshadowing of another Pope coming to solve the current Ukrainian war. This is a great movie. Fisherman with No Shoes is a great movie.
Well, and not to get us started on the Our Lady of Fatima stuff, because that's a whole nother can of worms. But I mean, Tucker Carlson does have the Fatima picture in his little man cave set that they've created for him there, which I guess makes it fair game again. I did notice you saw the Fatima picture, right? But the Our Lady of Fatima 1917 sighting of alleged sighting of the Virgin Mary in the forest in Fatima, Portugal, all ultimately boils down, to sum that up in a sentence, is Russia, Russia, Russia. The whole thing is about Russia. The whole prophecy, or the whole, I guess it's more than a prophecy. It's Mary, coming down and appearing to these children and telling these children that everybody in Western Europe has to, commit themselves to the winning over of Russia to Mary's Immaculate Heart is the terminology there. But I mean, it's Russia, Russia, Russia. You know, we do see quite a few Fatimaites. You know, and
Well, and here again,
But
Go ahead.
Mary,
Sorry.
but Mary's deified in the Orthodox tradition too. You know that there's,
Sure.
to the extent. So
I'm saying the Russia,
so
Russia,
their
Russia
message,
stuff.
The message, can be, like about about Christians in general, and not specifically Roman Catholics.
Sure. All right, you go, George. Sorry. Yeah.
I think that again the Pietro Benassi effect here is like you're saying, the Orthodox Church could be considered a bastardization by the Holy Roman Empire or the Pope of the Roman Empire as a bastardization of the czars. And what we need to do is, we need to go in there with a bioagent. We need to turn their bioagents, their bioweapons that they created, and through a soft hand, not a iron fist, but a velvet glove on the iron hand, and now start taking back these states that were really belonged to the Pope, right? The same thing is true in Italy, where you have the early breakout of coronavirus, where you say, okay, let's give it a go. Let's do a live exercise on the people who sided with the king and didn't side with the Pope and are living on the Pope's land. We went out there, hand in hand, cardinal cap in hand. Anthrax makes a cardinal cap. When they had Sverdlovsk, when they had the anthrax release, they always look at the cardinal cap. And so maybe that's a sign of God, the coronathrax, but here's our chance to develop a bioagent from the old Soviet arsenal, turn it around back on them, and clear out the bastardization of Russia and the Orthodox Church in Ukraine, which is the center, or like one of the holiest center of the Orthodox Church, and let's clear it out like it was so much crap through a goose. That's really where I see Pietro Benassi going with this next pope.
The writing's on the wall. And just to circle back there on the Vatican Bank and what you were saying about the Vatican Bank here. This is the early outbreak in Italy. I'm a little too slow. There's the early outbreak, the Lombardy region, way up north there. That's early COVID. So much to discuss there. But yeah, the Vatican Bank, which as I am learning here, is not actually called. So the Vatican Bank is a nickname, you might say, for it. And the official name is the Institute for the Works of Religion, which is like, okay, guys, whatever. You're just a bank.
Frau Hodel sent me that this morning and said, hey, Institute for Works of Religion is not actually the Vatican Bank. Our great researchers in Germany and reminded us that it is supposed to be for the Pope's works. It isn't just to finance, hey, do you Zelensky, do you want a chateau on Forte de Marmi near, what's his name? The Rothschild agent, Deripaska. Do you want a place in Cinque Terre on the water, right, for Zelensky? This isn't just a home loan and savings here. This is supposed to be for the Pope's works. If the Vatican Bank isn't working on bringing back the papal states to the Pope, who would be, right? If the Vatican Bank isn't going to bring back the Baku to the Pope and bring back all the oil and gas, that's really the Pope's, right? Where the czars, bastardize it, who will? So this is why I'm saying Pietro Benassi is the guy sitting on top of the bank, right? He's the one who has to figure out who the next Pope's going to be. And I think this is, like you said, Aaron, it's no more Mr. Nice Guy. They've had they had a nice guy, Ratzo, and then another nice guy. And I think this is the end of the no more Mr. Nice Guy. I think this is going to, you look at that papal procession last night, right? In the funeral procession, and tell me this isn't the righteous iron fist coming, right? That this is no longer Mr. Nice Guy. This isn't kissing the feet of any peasants. This is, we're coming out swinging, right?
Yeah,
as soon as you get, go ahead.
I was just saying, but the attendance is pretty sparse for this event. It doesn't look like the masses of the Catholic Church have been, moved too much by the passing of this Pope. Yeah, there's a little crowd there, but it's not like you'd expect. That chapel should have been filled with people. There wouldn't have been ropes and having you walk down the center. Just
Well,
so,
if you remember, the day I went into the hospital was the same day the Pope was taken into the hospital. He had a lung thing. That we don't know if it was Legionnaires or not, but it was a type of pneumonia, right? I made it out being younger, but the Pope, this took out that Pope, right? I'm not saying it was the same hydric exhaust vehicle that spit out the Legionnaires or whatever delivery system they have. I'm not saying it's that I was affected by the same thing the Pope was, but the Pope, I remember very clearly because it was the day I went into the ICU. It was the Pope was, taken out by this respiratory disease, and I gotta believe again, Ratso is supposedly dead, died in 2022, but there are the smoky souls that pick up the scepter for striking and with the hand of God with Pietro Benassi. He is going to be the key annuncio to the next pope, so he is the guy making this decision. I think the Cardinals make the decision, like throw out the candidates, but the selector is going to be Pietro Benassi, I believe, when it's all said and done.
when you're talking about the papal states and Benassi and his desire to bring these back, so that's like this Westphalian, the Westphalian model, the nation state, which would be counter to what the globalists want to do. So I'm trying to analyze, so is this where he's going? Is he's making these moves to fight the globalists and the global control and reassert the nation, the individual nation states as sovereign, which was what the Westphalian model brought us?
Well, this came up in the discussion this morning where Pope of the Different Color, I did a space called Pope of the Different Color, and we're not going over and recapitulating a lot of that, but we will here as we're talking. But Pope of the Different Color, somebody came forward and said, hey, what about Trump signing this Insurrection Act? Right. And I do think there is a new resurgence of MAGA, Catholic MAGA. J.D. Vance visited the Pope on the last day of his life. And I believe he believes Westphalia peace was more about stopping the internecine wars between Protestants and Catholics in Germany. Right. So Westphalia is the idea of self-determination. The people where they live can determine what kind of government they want and how they choose to practice religion. That was kind of the Westphalian compromise. Mark's the scholar, so I'll defer to him on that. But my point is that is this new, let's just say, strong-armed Catholicism, and you can hear Bannon beating the drum right now as well, as Mark mentioned, is this hey, we got to get this Muslim spy networks, this 1 minutes to midnight crowd, they got to go. We're not going to let them get PhDs anymore at our nuclear sites and bioweapons PhDs. They're on their way out. And you see this in Montana at Montana State, I think it is, in Bozeman, where they're trying to get rid of the PhD Iranian guy who's, condensed matter physics. He's obviously working on the Iranian nuclear program. And the gal they're trying to get rid of is, getting her master's or PhD in biotechnology for the virology program. Trump really has a problem with this, and so does J.D. Vance, right? Is like, you're using our universities to train your weapons of mass destruction people, and these are terrorist nations. They got to go. So I think the reason this re-energized Catholicism is sort of like Mark is saying, is sort of a holy war. We are sort of going back to the Battle of Malta. When was the Battle of Malta? 1588 or whatever it was, or maybe 1488. But we are kind of going back to that, which Dave mentioned, the Catholicism versus Muslim thing. And these guys do see themselves as regenerated warriors. When was the Siege of Malta?
1565. 1565.
Yeah.
Ottoman Empire attempted to conquer the island of Malta, then held by the Knights Hospitalier.
Hospitalier. And so the Knights of Hospitalier are basically the Knights of Malta now. But what you had was Christianity on the run, right? At least Catholicism on the run. The Suleiman and the Muslims, the Ottomans had beaten, not the Ottomans, but the Suleiman and the Muslims, the Muslim hordes had taken over Jerusalem. The Knights Hospitalier were supposed to keep it. They lost. They went back to Rhodes, the Greek island of Rhodes. They chased them there with their navy. They lost there, right? This is the bad news bears, right? They can't win it.
They got stopped at the gates of Vienna.
Yeah, Vienna. They lose Vienna. They end up going back. They have to go to run back to Daddy. They have to run back to the Pope, to Malta, right? And Suleiman chases them there with his navy in the siege of Malta. And what gives them their only win? These are the bad news bears, where they finally win a game, right? With bioweapons. St. Elmo's fire. They win with bioweapons. And what day do they win? September the 11th. That's when Suleiman takes off from Malta. So I don't think this might not mean anything to us, but if you're a holy warrior for the Pope, if you spent the last hours as J.D. Vance with the Pope, okay, you carry this the rest of your life. This is your mission the rest of your life, okay? Hermes fire, witch fire, etc. All these different, the luminous plasma, the corona discharge, right? These are your marching orders. And I do think that Ron from Sacramento was correct in the sense that this new act that Trump signed is to get the Suleimans out of our universities that are working on weapons of mass destruction. And the case is coming up. The case in Montana, the hearing is coming up. And maybe this is a globalist thing. Mark is saying maybe this is the, John Brennan and, P-TECH and Kadi, Kadi, Okadai. Kadi is the key money man behind P-TECH, and he is the key money man behind Al-Qaeda, right? Okadai. And he's the guy who's funding all this Muslim hordes. He funds the KLA, right, in Kosovo. Kadi is the one funding the people in Bosnia, right? And so I think this is like an ideological war. I think Mark's analysis of Bannon and the Catholics and your analysis with Fatima, and hey, this bullshit has gone on long enough. Tucker Carlson, we're taking back Russia. We're taking back the Tsar's bastardization of the church.
Is this Kadi? Yassine Kadi?
Oh,
Saudi
with a Q.
businessman.
With a Q.
Just a Q on there.
Well, I have some dirt. Do you want? Is it time for Washington DC dirt?
This has got to be. Wait here. Let me read the first. Is a Saudi Arabian businessman, a multimillionaire from Jeddah. Kadi trained as an architect in Chicago, Illinois. He is the son-in-law of Sheikh Ahmed Salah Jamjoom, a former Saudi Arabian government minister with close ties to the Saudi royal family. This has got to be him, right? UN placed sanctions on Kadi in 1999 and 2000 when he was named by the United Nations Security Council resolutions 1267 and 1333 as a suspended associate of Osama bin Laden's terror network, Al-Qaeda. On the 12th of October 2001, the U.S. Department of Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control ordered his assets in the United States to be frozen. European Union also applied sanctions to Kadi. Is the same Kadi?
Yeah, but usually it's spelled with a Q. So find me a Q, Kadi, and I'll be sure. But okay, this is what the Beatles sang about when they sang O Kadi, O Kada. They profess, they look for it. I'm joking, but you can almost see the Beatles foreshadowing O Kadi, O Kada. We're going to have, if we have Kadi being the financier, we're going to have Al Qaeda, right? It's like one shoe dropping, we're going to have the other shoe. We're going to have this globalist network under the covers of being the great Muslim horde, under the covers of being the global war on terror, under the covers of being this Muslim-led thing by Osama bin Laden, but Qadi is the real money man behind PTEC, right? This is going to be how we take over the world, right? And I do think there is a muscular Christianity and a muscular Catholicism, like Mark's talking about, being flexed here. You wouldn't have Bannon out there beating the drum if this wasn't what the Insurrection Act was all about. Trump wants to throw these actors that have been placed into our American universities that are getting advanced degrees in WMD, and he wants them to get the hell out. And they're fighting it with these district judges. So that's really what's going on, I think, in this Insurrection Act that they're talking about. I mean, when you're talking about suspending habeas corpus with the Insurrection Act, and then now Bannon's pushing the Insurrection Act, are we talking about suspending habeas corpus for 18-year-old German girls in Hawaii that want to work at the hotels in Hawaii, like just happened where they got incarcerated and so forth? Is that what we're really talking about? No, I don't think so. I think he wants to get rid of the guys that were Soleimani's little minions that were doing the coronavirus thing. So I'll let Mark chime in here because I know he knows way more than I do.
I lost my train of thought here.
No,
let me come back.
I'll tell you, the J.D. Vance thing. I don't want to be conspiratorial. Now, even what you're telling me is making me think more. Because at first I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like, did they just weekend at Bernie's the Pope and he's been dead and they, marched him out there, or they did something just to tell the public that he died Easter morning and that, coincidentally, J.D. Vance was there hours before he died.
No, I think they got rid of it.
They got rid of him. They brought J.D. I don't even know if J.D. knows this. It's almost like, hey, J.D., you're going to go visit the Pope. Somebody pulled
somebody pulled the plug on them because it was no more Mr. Nice Guy. And they had their guy in J.D. Vance. He's the new Cheney, right? He's the foreign policy. He's the foreign policy of the United States. Trump's kind of off doing tariffs, but the person who's flexing the muscles on the foreign stage is J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance is going to be the holy warrior here, right? He's going to be the Pope's holy warrior. And it was time for no more Mr. Nice Guy, right? Ratzinger is the one who did coronavirus, right? In the northern regions, right? They brought in the nice guy Pope and then they got rid of him. They're not going to use this guy. I got some dirt. I got some DC dirt.
All right. Lay it on.
Well, I was told this by a very learned person who's worked the DC circuit at the Washington Press Club and was one of my key contacts at Washington Press Club, that none other than Wayne Madsen, had a and I shouldn't laugh, but I know Wayne. He's
been on the show here. We used to.
Yeah, he's not Clark Gable. He's not Brad Pitt. Neither am I. So we're both. I love Wayne, and I've met with him many times. But he had a torrid romance, I find today, with Indira Singh. And I know Indira Singh is the key whistleblower for 9/11, for PTEC, for Al-Qadi, for Qadi. Remember Gulen? Remember Gulen and me going out to the home of wayward girls in Saylorsburg? Gulen Network was a big part of this Turkish network for financing KLA. And this was this was going to be the soft Muslims, right? This was going to be they're westernized. They're all from Turkey. They can start all these Gulen schools. We'll infiltrate across the whole country. We'll get in and, drive the globalist agenda, into the United States. And this is what I think Trump isn't that, he's not that religious of an ideologue, right? But J.D. Vance is. J.D. Vance is. And this is what I think the Insurrection Act's all about.
This is Indira Singh. I didn't know about her.
Well, that was the thing, was okay, because the idea was, but this Insurrection Act is only going to be used against foreign nationals. It's not going to be used against American citizens. So, and again, when you come back with it, where it's because of getting due process, but there wasn't any due process for J6 defendants. They sat in jail for months. The Supreme Court wouldn't help them, but now they're willing to help, Venezuelan gang members, be sure that they get due process and they get their day in court, okay, and that they don't have things done to them. So that's what's coming out, is people are seeing this, all of this kind of stuff.
I agree with you, and I obviously spent a lot of time on the Iwan spy ring, and we ran down the money sources, and that's why we went to Saylorsburg, and that's why we went to Gulen. And Gulen, Wayne Madsen, who is an all-time Trump hater, Trump derangement syndrome. Although I love Wayne because he knows 9/11 backwards and forwards.
Mm-hmm.
Now I look at his stuff and go, he was the one telling me that Gulen and the Gulen network was this kind of happy face Muslim moderate with a moderate face but nasty teeth. The show dog, but has nasty teeth. He was the one telling me that this Gulen network was going in. Now, this is a network Flynn has had a long-term relationship with. Jim Woolsey's had a long-term relationship with. This is the whole idea of not having the hijackers, right, which are overt and nasty, and we need to be afraid. This is the silent covert network, right, the infiltration network.
They work through NATO?
Through NATO, yeah. And maybe this is a reason, this is how NATO justifies itself, right? Because we have to come up with a global war on terror. How are we going to do it? How are we going to develop the youth and the Gulen schools? That I went to so many Gulen schools and interviewed so many teachers, right? Mainly in the Chicago area, but I also went to Minnesota and so forth. What it is a soft Muslim love like Christianity until the time of the first puberty. And then the boys start radicalizing the boys. And this was the idea of, hey, we need to have sort of a constant supply of these radical Muslim young men that will then go to these anti-McCabe mosques in Virginia, and then they'll learn bomb making, right? Because if we don't have something to take the place of the Soviet Union, we're out of jobs here at the FBI, right? We can't keep recruiting Timothy McVeighs as snipers and assassins to kill everybody involved in Iran-Contra and then hook them, make them the fall guy for Oklahoma City. We can't keep doing this. It takes a lot of effort just for one guy. We need a constant supply. The McVeigh model doesn't scale. We need a constant supply. So that's why he was doing all these Gulen schools. They would go from the Gulen schools back to the Gulen headquarters there in Saylorsburg, and they had the school for wayward girls, so the guys were getting all the sex they needed. And Task Force and I did a lot of this, where she went to a lot of the actual places where they were doing the training at these training camps, right? And there was like 50 some odd. I went to the Islamic Society of North America headquarters in near. This is not. That's John Paul, right?
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say, but him having this big meeting with Pope John Paul looks like Fethullah Gulen in 1998 had a big meeting with John Paul II that he got a lot of criticism for, by more,
well, this is Kosovo, because see, Soros wants Kosovo. Soros wants to chop off the bottom half. This is the whole idea of, hey, we were the ones who arbitrated and brokered Russia, selling Russia by the pound. Why can't we be the extractors of all the value? Why can't we be the ones that puts the straws into the natural gas reservoirs, and we, with our pipelines, be the benefactors? So what they're trying to do is soften the image here of Gulen, because Gulen's going to be the one financing. A lot of it's going to come from NATO and Turkey, but a lot of it's going to come from Albania. We're going to have a lot of the Al Qaeda guys who were the Azerbaijan and Afghanistan and so forth. The Mujahideen, we're going to move the Mujahideen in, and the Mujahideen are going to clear our pipeline. That we clear the pipeline in 92 to 95 in Bosnia, but then we got a problem with Serbia. That's the roadblock here. We got to punch a hole through Serbia. Let's cut the bottom half off of Serbia with Kosovo, right? So there's a big PR campaign with Gulen, Al-Qaeda, Okada. There's a big, money thing with PTEC, right? Getting into the financial accounts in 9/11 to finance this, basically straw into the reserves of the Russian oil and gas.
Fascinating stuff. Mark, any comments there? You've seen the pictures I'm throwing up. Yep, Gulen of Saylorsburg, Pennsylvania. You know, there's a lot of connections with Mike Flynn there that maybe, you know, people will get mad at us if we talk about.
People are mentioning Sibel Edmonds. We went and visited with Sibel Edmonds several times in Florida. I wrote a book about Sibel Edmonds from our time there. And she was worked quite a bit with James Corbett, if you remember, on Boiling Frogs. She had a show with James Corbett, but we talked about her quite a bit about Gulen, and she was all over this too. She was saying, "Hey, Gladio B, you know, Gladio C, Gladio B is taking over these countries of the, you know, Muslim countries with this soft Muslim, westernized Muslim message for pipelines, right?" And she was saying Gladio C is happening right now in the United States with soft Muslim, you know, palatable. You know, they don't have 8 wives that are 12, and you know they don't openly preach, you know, death to America and death to Israel, and you know, in their pulpits or in their mosques and so forth. This is the Andy McCabe Virginia Mosque, where this is the Muslim guy next door, and he mows his yard just like we mow our yard. You know, what's the difference between us, really? Just a hedge. There's only a hedge in between us.
It's like that one in Harrisburg where Tyrone's car always broke down. Yeah,
with the missile spires, missile spires in Perrysburg. I always look at the missile spires in Perrysburg going, where are those missiles aimed at? You know, I think one of them is coming right down on you in Lambertville there.
But their head guy over there's a big collaborator with CNN. He's always on CNN doing stuff and everything. So it's like you're saying, you know, it's watered down for the American audiences. School play, made for TV.
People do talk about the trafficking, and we did cover this with the Delphi murders, where they abduct the girls, and then as a rite of passage, every kid rapes the girl. It's a gang rape, and then at the end of the thing, they kill the girl. Now, people say, well, how do you know the girls are killed? When the head is separated from the body from a garroting that they taught in these camps that Task Force was talking about. I wrote a couple of books about this. What task forces reported, but this is serious business. This is how you create a cell. If we're all together, right, all the 16-year-olds that are coming of age, and we all rape together a 12-year-old girl, and then one of us takes a garrote and pulls and separates her head from her body, we're in it for life. That's murder. That's gang rape, then murder. We're in it for life now, guys, and that's the cell. And it's a cell of secrecy. And I don't know how many cells there are, but they do exist. And I'm not saying the Iranian PhD guy studying, you know, condensed matter physics is a part of this cell. I'm not saying that. But there was this concentration at Purdue University, at the one we went to with Mitch Daniels, where they were recruiting, and they had a mosque, and they had a mosque fraternity, and they seemed to be recruiting people for bioweapons. That's where anthrax is made. Dave's talked about it many times with Vigo and Evonik and so forth. It did seem like they were preparing a generation for this anthrax warfare. And so, you know, is it related? If you look at the description and accounts, again, Netflix did their series on the Delphi murders and left out the most important people. They picked out a pharmacist at CVS who was drugging the girls. Again, that's like the current LISK murders, where they have the finder and they're saying the finder did all the murders. That's not the conspiracy. That's one of the cogs of the enablers of the conspiracy, not the conspiracy. So
you think they got the wrong guy with this Richard Allen?
You mean the Delphi murders?
Yeah, you think that he's
no. You know, he provided the drugs. He provided I can't remember what drugs it was that he provided, but the drugs to yeah, he was the CVS. They give him these weird, wacky things once they get in prison.
CVS. He's the employee from the CVS.
He's the CVS pharmacist that when they came in and said we want these, it was some kind of phenobarbital type, date rape drug. I don't know what it was, but he was providing the drugs. He was there. But again, it's not the key to the conspiracy. We took you on the campus in Lafayette of the conspiracy of the government financed mosque, right? We took you there. We took you to the Islamic Society in North America. Task Force went to a lot of the camps. She had done with this Christian group, had done a lot of the reporting. She's my ex cop partner who passed away in 2018. And where they taught garroting, double garroting, and with wire, piano wire, so that the girls would die silently. This has been filmed and recorded and documented. This is not conspiracy theory.
There is actually, for those interested in learning more about Task Force, her YouTube channel is still alive. They didn't cancel this, and nothing's been added to it in 6 years, you can see here. But Task Force Whistleblower's Journey live in DC. 96 videos, a little over 3,000 subscribers. You can definitely see it all here. You do not, I believe, ever see her face. She didn't ever really want her face. She would show her hands and, did the whole turn the camera outwards thing as she walked around. But definitely George appears in some of these videos, not all of them, but I think she appeared on your channel more than you appeared on hers back when you were allowed to have a YouTube channel. Really great stuff here.
She was a deep diver. And because she was a woman, it's less intimidating than a 6'8" guy coming at you and starting to ask you questions. Hey, I'm reporter from so and so. She would go in there, hey, you got a cigarette? If the person was obviously a smoker, she'd say, hey, you know what, I'll be back here with another pack of cigarettes. What's your favorite brand? She would develop her informants. She was very good at developing informants and ingratiating people to then give her information. She was extremely good at that. I wish I had that talent. But yeah, she knocked on Imran Awan's door. She knocked on everybody's door. She had no fear whatsoever. She went into the hole of Awan spying into every house. Right. And I'm sitting outside. I'm the one with no backup. I'm going in if she doesn't come out in 5 minutes. That's I can't count how many times that happened. And it was late at night, and with swatting and everything, a probably good chance I'd have got shot. So we did that a lot. And she was really into this Muslim network. She thought that there was, this Muslim network was being used, and if they ever wanted to take Trump out, right, they would have a whole bunch of people, spray paint at car dealerships, and those would be the softies, but then they would have the hard asses that had been doing this garroting training and so forth as a ready reserve to kill people, to go to Trump rallies and so forth and kill people, in mass shooting type, like an army, right? Like a Gladio C. It was Sibel Edmonds, Gladio C. This is going down to the law office of this is going to the law office of Imran Awad, and she's like, why did they send Imran's laptop to you in a criminal investigation? Why would they not send that to the prosecution? The prosecution had said that they wanted the laptop so they could see all of his messages in the Gulen network, right? That I remember going down the stairs, yeah. And this is where she serves Imran. Yeah, this is a good one.
Here, I'll turn the volume on, I guess, while we're
watching. Let's see if anyone actually comes to the door to answer.
She had a lot of balls. She had a lot of courage. Because this guy heads up a network. And he was staying with the attorney.
Right. Imran himself comes to the door.
Imran himself comes to the door, yeah. She's unarmed, by the way. She's unarmed. She was unarmed all the time she was in Washington, D.C. She was unarmed.
So, speeding it along here.
She wouldn't take no from the answer either.
Oh, we do got somebody right here.
She knocked on the door of the head of PTEC, by the way. The head bomb maker.
Hi, sir. How are you? Is Mr. Imran Awan here? Imran Awan?
Wrong address.
Is this Gowan's?
No, this is 511 Calvin Court.
Oh God,
Where's
that's
the
for us to do this.
Gowan?
No, with address.
I don't know. It's Chris Gowan's law firm. I don't know.
I have no idea.
I heard it was here. Okay, that's all right.
It's probably up and down.
And then she walks across.
But it
That's
might be
that's an.
over
She comes.
This is it.
Gowan, Rhodes, Winograd, Silva, law offices, Suite 100. I've made it. So let's try this
DC's
again.
so crazy.
Well, they were hidden as well as they could be hidden, and with you see the steel bars on the door. You know, they were in Georgetown, by the way. The law firm was in Georgetown, I believe. There's Imran.
Hi, Imran.
He's not.
Yeah, this is you. Here you go. You're served, Imran. You're served right there, buddy. So that was Imran Awan. We just provided service to him here at his place, and you guys can see that he came on camera, and he's now been officially served.
There you have it, right?
And I didn't
Too
use that
fast.
for my DNC lawsuit. I didn't use that service. I used same day service, and I professionally served him because she could have been considered a non-neutral party, and you have to use a server which is a non-neutral party. So I made sure I served him with same day service, but she served him as well. That was my lawsuit that she was holding.
Oh,
right?
okay, fair enough. Good.
Yeah. So this, and then Judge Shedkin is the one who was our judge, which is Trump's judge in the January 6th case. And then Judge Chutkin was removed from the case.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize.
She was considered to Judge Boasberg, the one that currently is ruling, like Mark said, for the Venezuelan. Judge Boasberg is the one who removed it away from Chutkan because she was too close to the DNC, and he removed it to Rudy, the Spanish guy, the Hispanic guy, Rudy.
That'll have it for us.
Yeah. Anyway, he was dining with Lisa Page and Peter Strzok. He was going to dinner parties with Lisa Page and Peter Strzok. So I went from the frying pan, which was the person that the Trump J6, which was Judge Shedkin. They call it shit can because your lawsuits aren't going anywhere against the DNC with hers. And then Rudy Contreras. Rudy Contreras.
The FISA court judge. Sorry.
Yeah, the FISA court judge. So my DNC lawsuit wasn't going anywhere. I lasted a long time with that lawsuit. Gerald Beck looked at it and went, wow, I wish I would have had that kind of evidence, because I had evidence about Act Blue, about how Act Blue had been turned into Act Blues to divert money away from
dirty money.
Right.
Take all Bernie's money and give it to Hillary.
And Gerald Beck looked at that and said, wow, you have some juice in your DNC lawsuit of Act Blue. This is why when James O'Keefe comes out with his Act Blue stuff right now, I'm like, well, where were you in 2017 when I needed you, brother? But that's okay. He's got Jordan Walker, and he's working on that Pfizer org chart. He's going to get to Schwang Wu here pretty quick.
Here's Act Blue. They really are something. Sweep up that money, you said. Sweep up that money, but
Act Blue is the key funding arm still to this day. The guys that are doing the shake the paint can and doing the F Doge and F Musk, the dealerships at the Manhattan dealerships and so forth. The key people giving money to support that are giving money still to Act Blue.
Yeah,
there was that story about these. I think it was O'Keefe going around to donors, to Act Blue, that had given maybe $30 in a donation, but according to Act Blue, they've given thousands of dollars.
Yeah. That was O'Keefe.
So should we do comments here? We've hit an hour. Let's do some comments. I scrolled up about halfway, and then I'll hit a few.
Let's go all the way back because there was some really good comments, and we missed a few. So
this is pretty far back. I was thinking I'd start right here because I queued this up on the video at least. But Dave's talking about Pope John Paul doing mass at the Pontiac Silverdome. This was back in, Pontiac Silverdome was a big deal they had WrestleMania there, WrestleMania 3 or something like that. It's just making a big thing out of it. This is just a video of that. We won't play any audio from it, but I don't know. You recall any of this going on?
Yeah, I do. And because that's where I think Silverdome is where the Lions played for a while, and I remember the Tears in the Silverdome. But I also remember, we're in Dearborn. One of our key places we take people is the Ford Museum in Dearborn, and I went and covered. I think it was it Tulsi Gabbard and then Robert F. Kennedy. I covered Tulsi Gabbard and Robert F. Kennedy on the presidential trail in Dearborn, and I went to some of the mosques in Dearborn. A lot of people think it's just all Huma Abedin and it's all mosque, but it's not. There's a Christian community there as well. But Dearborn, of course, is where Ford is based, and one of our key stops when we have the Jamboree Extravaganza in August. Although I may be coming earlier. I heard Mark has a 2-bedroom apartment now. I may be coming next week, or at least staying in
your lung there. Your lung is not back to anywhere near 100. Well, maybe it is.
Well, at least I could stay in the basement, right? I mean, at least I could be back on my own.
Yeah, you can go, of course, anytime. But everybody's happy you're getting healthy. Don't fall back into any of those.
Well, as long as I stay away from the hydric, Legionnaire projecting contagion. But my point is that this thing isn't too far away. The reason why it's in Dearborn, the reason why Huma Abedin and the Blackberries and everything is in Dearborn, isn't because they just chose it out of a hat. It's because of Ford and Ford Aerospace there and Ford Nuclear being there. And the same thing is true for the other car component companies that do all kinds of stuff in aviation and automobile. The vibration testing that I can't remember the name, Hinges that Burisma bought with anti-vibration technology. Anti-vibration's not a big deal in cars. It's nice when you don't have doors that rattle. But if you have a missile that rattles or a plane that rattles, that's how you have Challenger accidents, right? So when Hunter Biden, and I've been up to Hinges in north, that's to the north up by Chrysler and GM. But if you get vibration on a 13,000 mile round trip flight of an ICBM, that's a big deal. That's called a Challenger accident. That's how the Challenger was vibrating, and then the blowtorch of flame then came out, right, and then caused the separation in the metal shield, and then it got into the liquid hydrogen, and then it got into the liquid oxygen, and then you blew up everything. So when Hunter Biden is buying the anti-vibration technology, it sounds so innocuous, right? Oh, he's just making sure the cars don't rattle, in Eastern European countries for the Deripaska, Volgograd bus and stuff. He's just exfiltrating some stuff to Volgograd. It's not a big deal. It is a big deal. For missile technology, for the Iranian missile technology, this was their way of selling this stuff to the developing countries that wanted to develop missile programs. This is a big effing deal, especially also aviation. When you go supersonic, vibration is a big deal. Believe me, right? This is how F-35s don't, make their turns, is because of vibration, and shit comes loose. And then those are key components, your flaps or whatever, your rudder. And now you got a dead pilot and a scrap piece of metal. So that's why I'm saying these Muslim enclaves aren't put next to the Ford as close as you can get, being in their underarm hair for no reason. There's good reason here. And a lot of it with Lisa Page, especially, and Huma Abedin, was to get this technology out to Iran. They were selling this stuff to Iran under the table, just like the nuclear technology, for kickbacks to the DNC. That's what my whole lawsuit was about.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you don't have the right anti-vibration technology, your missile might end up hitting the wrong target. If you're aiming for Israel and you've got the wrong, footers on the bottom of your missile that can't handle the shaky shake, you might end up hitting Syria or Iraq, or it's a tight area in there. So
remember the Klotzworthy's hand inside the Unha rocket? What are the Klotzworthys doing? What's a CNN reporter supposedly? What's an American, CNN reporter, got his hand in the Unha-3 rocket, right? What happened to Unha-1 and Unha-2 in North Korea? They both blew up. One got into the atmosphere, but the other one didn't even make it to the atmosphere. Why is Klotzworthy's hand inside the North Korean rocket right before the Unha-3 launches, their first successful launch, right? That shows you that there is a back door here with Peter Strzok, right? Getting key technology to Iran to keep the war going, to keep the global war on terror going. And this is what Trump, I think, is going after, right? Trump doesn't care about Peter Strzok so much. He wouldn't be doing the Insurrection Act now, right? He wouldn't be doing the Insurrection Act now because Peter Strzok's now a Georgetown professor. He's not, people think, oh, he's going after all the people who did the takedown of Trump in 2017 with Carter Page and George Papadopoulos and the Club of Rome that was going on. No, this is about this. This is about this ideological war. And I think it's J.D. Vance's ideological war. Just my opinion, but I think this is where we're going, is stop giving these people weapons of mass destruction in order to forward the idea that there's this global war on terror.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna end this giving technology to ISIS, and this is something that Tulsi Gabbard fought with McCain, giving Muslim Brotherhood all these weapons. We left all these weapons deliberately in Afghanistan, right, in order to support the idea of global war on terror. Our guy Cofer Black from CIA was developing Osama bin Laden so he could develop the global war on terror. Right? Dick Cheney developing the global war on terror. All these things lead back kind of to 9/11, where they said, we need a global war on terror. 93 didn't do it. World WTC 1 didn't do it, right? We had the fall of the Soviet Union in 91, 92, and everyone's like, oh, what are we going to do now? We don't have an enemy anymore. NATO doesn't have an enemy anymore. It's a Cold War relic. NATO's going to go away. Oh, no, guys, I got it. We're going to do a live exercise down at the World Trade Center. We're going to have a bombing at the World Trade Center, and that'll get everybody to give away all their constitutional rights, and we'll start the global war on terror, right? So the FBI wired it all up. The FBI recruited all the Muslims out of that Patterson Mosque and the Newark Mosque. Robin Gritz.
Mm-hmm.
Again, if you really want to go a global war on these guys, reinstate Robin Gritz. But anyway, with the blind sheik and all that. But my point is that didn't take. 93 was a fail. The whole world didn't go, you know what? We got to have a global war on terror, right? 95 didn't do it with Timothy McVeigh. OKC didn't do it, right? Waco, didn't do it. That was PatCon, right? That Operation PatCon. It didn't do it. We need to have the FBI more powerful than they were than when we had Soviet agents running around. That didn't make sense to a whole bunch of people. Everyone was thinking about the peace dividend with Bill Clinton, right? You needed a 9/11 type event, a PTEC, Okadai type event in order for people to say, yes, let's give away all of our constitutional rights. Yes, let's have intrinsic, pervasive biosurveillance. Yes, I'm ready to fight the global war on terror, right? It wasn't until 9/11 that there was a mass formation psychosis. All these events leading up, the Kobar Tower bombings, the bombing of the embassy in Kenya, the bombing of the embassy in Tanzania, again, Peter Strzok relatives running both of those, kind of weird, right? Mm-hmm. Hillary Clinton, again, watch out for Hillary Clinton in the West Wing of the White House. Embassies blow up when she's in that White House. Who was in the White House with her as a supposedly a Secret Service agent? Peter Strzok, right? That wasn't enough. People, Kobar where? Kobar who? Kobar Towers, 98?
Yep.
Right? That didn't take. You needed 9/11. OKC, really horrible, but it didn't take.
Mm-hmm. It's all about the school play for the moms in the soccer vans.
Mass formation psychosis. And the thing is, I think even when it happened, and I remember going to OKC after this, even after it happened, like kindergarten teachers at the school where all the kids, died and everything, and just normal passersby were, that memorial hadn't been built when I went there, but they're going like, You know, those 4 steel columns, that would have had to have been shape charges. No way an air blast, could take out those 4 steel columns, Casual passersby on the street walking their dog say, yeah, there was some controlled demolition there with those steel beams. An air blast never could even. Sam Cohen of the Rand Corporation, right? Mr. Neutron Bomb himself came out and said, there's no way, no matter how much fertilizer you have, no matter how much oil you have, the Ryder truck sitting there that distance away from the glass, yeah, you'd shatter a lot of glass. You'd create a suction, right? There's Sam. See what he said about OKC. He's the top expert in explosives, right? At Rand Corporation. He's saying that you would need a sort of a neutron bomb type of thing or shape charges on the 4 key columns, right? Now, when you've got the top expert from Rand Corporation telling you that there had to be shape charges on the 4 struts, and where were the 4 struts, right? Where were the 4 columns? They were over Secret Service, which Rand, was running ops for Bill Clinton, right? When he got to Washington, they were over ATF. ATF was where all the Bill Clinton's Arkansas state troopers had gone to get jobs after Bill Clinton left the White House, and they were running operations. Danny Sullivan and all those guys. There was 8 of them killed at Waco, right? 5 of them killed at Waco, right? Those 4 struts just happened to be all over all the investigations into Iran-Contra, Mina Airport, into Waco as an alternative landing zone for Iran-Contra, right? Bill Barr, don't shrink the laundry, right? And the 4 struts that had shape charges just happened to be directly over those investigations. The same thing is true with World Trade Center 7, which is directly over the Enron investigation. Here we go. Sorry, I didn't need to kind of go off on all these things, but all of these things that were to take out Iran-Contra investigations and Enron investigations didn't get to the mass formation psychosis that you need, where people say, you know what, all that I learned in the civics classes, I'm throwing it out. I'm ready for pervasive surveillance.
This was when Janet Reno was Attorney General. All of this went on too.
Janet, I'm not sure she's a woman. Reno, yes.
Here, so we're gonna move
next comment. I'm ready for the next comment. That was just one comment.
No, we're gonna move over to Carol here, back to the Vatican Bank and the Pope news and everything. So,
Gonzalez, I don't know.
The IOR, that's I presume that's the the IOR's first banker, Michelle Sedona,
that's Vatican Bank,
was from Sicily and part of the mob. It laundered the Gladio money through the IOR. It became a huge scandal when it collapsed in the Franklin fiasco. Fascinating. I didn't know that. Yeah.
Well, I didn't know that the Vatican Bank collapsed during the Franklin scandal. The Franklin scandal, if you remember, was being run by the most holy of holy charities in America, which was Boys Town, by Father Flanagan. Which, again, how does Nick Jacobs show up there with 100 virologists? Are we sure we're not testing vaccines on the young boys? How does Nick Jacobs end up going from Father Flanagan's Boys Town to Windber? Because they wanted to get the blood samples closer to Bethesda. That is the answer to the test. But this is Michelle Sedona. Read more about this, Aaron. I don't know this person.
This is so let's see. Was an Italian banker and convicted felon known in banking circles as the Shark. Sedona was a banker for the Sicilian Mafia and the Vatican. Sedona was a member of the fascist Propaganda Do, a secret Masonic lodge of the Grand Orient of Italy. He was fatally poisoned in prison while serving a life sentence for the murder of lawyer Giorgi Ambrosoli, born into a poor family. So this guy, he was in charge of the Vatican.
Propaganda Due. Propaganda 2 is Due in Italian, right? And the propaganda there is Nazis plus the church, right? That's the Propaganda Due. And all of they use the Freemasonry, they use the Masonic lodges and so forth as the initial cover and meeting spots for Operation Underground. This was brought by CIA and Meyer Lansky, and Luciano to run the drugs from Sicily after World War II. Right? This is Whitney Webb talks about this. Other people talk about this, but this is the great migration of the drug business from which had been the French business. Now it becomes the Italian connection, not the French connection, but the Italian connection. And they were running it through Sicily, and they used the Masonic lodges. You read the book Operation Gladio, they go into the extensive detail into this.
Absolutely. So yeah, this is an article just from a day ago. The $6 billion Vatican Bank was beset by scandals, disastrous investments, and ties to the mafia. How Pope Francis tried to fix it. I wonder if that's even what you're like. I don't know about fix.
Well, he tried to fix it by putting in controls and oversight, but he didn't go after the perpetrators like Ratzinger. Right? Ratzinger was the consigliere at this time, the number 2 man. Ratzinger could have killed Pope Francis in the night with a stiletto stabbing. Stilettos first were knives before they were heels. Could have killed him with a stiletto anytime. Right? So he knew that he had limited leash here. So he had a limited leash.
Yeah, calls coming in here, but because he was a sick bastard who approved abortion and CIA gay crap. I don't know what that was referring to. Sorry,
that's talking about Sedona.
Oh yeah, Chief Executive Officer of Amviscap PLC's European Invesco unit.
I remember Invesco. I remember that scandal. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, they just used the laundry until some engaging reporter or some engaging attorney would.
Well, this dude is Invesco, the 35-year-old chap on Wall Street. Sorry.
Well, my point is that they would get that far, and then they would just collapse the bank. So after somebody would, had investigated and so forth to a certain point, they would get rid of the guy. Obviously, they got rid of Sedona, and then just collapse the bank, and then just reconstitute it as something else under another name.
As soon as the Latin Mass celebrated Lucifer and made a snake church, they lost their base. We've all seen that, yeah, the photos, and they're just.
He's an unrequited. Oh God, that was Ed. Oh God, what was his show called? Outer Light. He was awesome. Ed was awesome. The task force's favorite person was Ed with his New Zealand accent from Outer Light. He would go through all the symbology of all the, the kind of the crazy satanic turn of the Catholic Church after, I can't remember which pope it was. Yeah.
Hospitaliers provided the stay behind network for retreating Templars and Crusaders.
Yeah, and hospitality was their thing. So there was some symbology of, any Jesuit traveler or any spy could take respite at a hospitalier home wherever they were traveling in their network. So Carter Page could roll into Indianapolis, and stay with a hospitalier.
Catholics in Action was where B-25 crashed into Empire State Building, constructed by John Jacob Rascab, the treasurer of Knights of Malta and GM/DuPont financial genius.
Boy, Dave, don't get me started. Of course, Jacob Rascab's house is where we had the Russian spies that were infiltrating Trump's campaign in 2017. How many times did we go out there? I went to the New York one and went to the Maryland one, almost drowned going to the Maryland facility. But yeah, out on Long Island there. Treasurer of the Knights of Malta, not necessarily meaning the whole organization's bad, but it's a great way to launder money. Rascab's a big guy in bringing, before they brought the Russians in, after the fall of the Soviet Union, he was a big guy bringing in the German scientists. The Wagner guide bomber was there at his house. I can't remember all the teams that came through there. The bioweaponeers came through there. Everybody and their brother came through there. If you were in Traub came through there because of Plum Island. Plum Island's not too far from the Rascab house out there on Long Island. And isn't it interesting? The Raytheon autopilot. Raytheon, so the Nazis were working on a drone technology, and the Wagner guide bomber was their first it was the pilot was supposed to parachute out of the plane, 5 miles from the target, and then you're on your own to get back. And then they would try to fly it by radio. They would have agents on the ground, and they were trying to. This is Marilyn Monroe and radio plane, right? They were trying to fly it into the building or into the target, into the last, bits. This is where 9/11 comes from, right? This is the idea of the radio plane. But the B-25 that Dave's talking about that hit the Empire State Building was a Raytheon plane, and it left from Hanscom Air Force Base, right? Which is, Bob Malone fame, and, the only Air Force base that, it does bioweapons. We'll just, there's a Benassi involved, and I won't go into the whole story, but Benassi's working on bioweapons at Hanscom Air Force Base. But it takes off from Hanscom Air Force Base in Massachusetts and hits the floor of Catholics in Action. So they buy out Catholics in Action. And Dave doesn't remember, but what replaced Catholics in Action, right, was Mossad. Mossad headquarters, I can't remember what the front company was, but Mossad replaces Catholics in Action where, and I can't remember who bought it now.
Yeah, but Catholics in Action is CIA.
Correct. It's always been a joke at CIA, Catholics in Action. What's the guy, the sidekick who was in Italy, Dr. with Alex Jones, a doctor. He was sidekick to Armitage with all the torture in Italy.
Oh, I don't know. Someone will have it for us there. Yeah,
that's a Russian name. But can continue. Catholics in Action goes all the way back. I covered this in the morning. Goes all the way back to Pius the 10th, right? Pius IX said popes are infallible, right? There's the revolution in Italy. Then the king's forces take over from the popes. They take the papal states. Catholics in Action actually goes all the way back to a subversive group, because the Mussolini groups originally were persecuting the religious groups, right? So that's whole subversive group goes back to Italy. And then Pope the 11th, Pius the 11th, was Mussolini's pope. He's the one who made a détente with Mussolini. And this is where Catholics in Action comes from, right? And the Catholics in Action, their job is to get the papal states back to the Pope. Pure, plain and simple. Pius XII, Hitler's Pope, does the same, kind of carries on. But this is where you're kind of radicalizing the Catholics in Action. And then CIA picks it up. Angleton picks it up from Italy and then puts that into it. That is the action group. Catholics in Action is the action group in the United States, with Cardinal Spellman and the Dulles, the nephew of Alan Dulles, when he takes over as the cardinal.
Any comment, Mar? Okay, continue on. JD is flexing the Palantir foreign policy. I tend to agree. I think George tends to agree. We tried to be nice as long as we could. I mean, we tried to. I don't know. We did the whole thing. We were Dark Maga Studios. We still are Dark Maga Studios. But yeah, we see JD being positioned by.
Well, Thiel did bankroll JD JD Vance. I think that he admits that. But I do think there is.
Doesn't every coach have a hatchet man? And isn't that what he is? He's just the hatchet man.
Bill Laimbeer, for the Detroit Pistons, But I do think that there is a consanguinity in missions here between the Mossad mission and the Catholics in Action mission. J.D. Vance doesn't care about Gaza. J.D. Vance cares about the papal states, right? And getting those back to the Pope, right? But the same bioagents that selectively go through and take out the king's men and bring in the Pope's men in the papal states, you can use that same bioagent in Gaza to roll up by the Gaza. And again, I'm doing a show with a Super Jew for Jordan Peterson going after us, right? I'm doing a show with a guy with the nickname Super Jew, and I volunteered or tried to go to serve in Israel, and also my kids. So stop saying that we're psychopaths. We have more courage to fight for Israel than you pukes, right? Who call us psychopaths on Joe Rogan, right? You have done nothing for Israel. We've put life, limb, and treasure on the line for Israel. So shut STFU.
There are two Zionisms. There's the Zionism that's pro-Israel and says, hey, we've got to make Israel the home for the Jews. And then there's the Zionism that says the last place we should make is Israel because it's too focused on our history. We need to be the light of the world, and we need to, show the world how our, Jewish ideologies or whatever are going to help promote, one world government or global this, global that. Those are the George Soros, Baha'i Esperantist Zionists, you might say, who, I don't know, they used to call them, his father, grandfather, all of them were Zionists. They're the ones who wanted Madagascar, right? Remember, all the Jews were going to go to Madagascar and they were going to live there. And then all of the amazing things they were going to create in Madagascar were going to change the world.
Barodian.
So it's like, they're still out there.
Madagascar is just code for South Africa. Just
right.
The Boers didn't figure it out, right? But anyway,
we'll have to start our good Mossad, bad Mossad show. We've been talking about that for years. We just have a whole separate program all about, all the Jewish stuff, the Chabad Lubavitch, everything else. We'll even make hats, Trump. Since everyone's so angry at, Trump and Chabad, I was thinking, Mark and I were talking about how would you make a meme on that? Make Chabad Lubavitch great again. Maglacha. Maglacha, something like that, and MACLA, or was it right on the hat? It's kind of the make Chabad Lubavitch great again, and we're not surprised. It's
here's where, and Mark, go ahead, Mark, if you wanted to comment.
Yeah, no. You continue, George. Yeah.
My point is, if you want to roll up Gaza, we wrote about that 8 years ago in Braverman Prophecy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a whole series. You can read it today. I wrote it 8 years ago. They're gonna roll up the Gaza, right? It's the Nakbar number 2. They're gonna roll up the Gaza. They're gonna do the Ben Gurion pipeline. If they were gonna get 100 atomic bombs to blow up the channel for the Ben Gurion pipeline in 1962. They've been trying for 50 years. They're gonna have this. That's not where you start World War III. Where you start World War III is when you start sending missiles to Iran. And then Russia or China steps in on the side of the Iranians. And now we've got a limited exchange nuclear war in the Middle East. That's how World War III starts. And all we're saying is focus on the Gaza, focus on the Ben Gurion pipeline, it's all desert anyway. Really.
I think we should focus on Turkey too, as a NATO member, to possibly be a flashpoint in all of this.
Absolutely. With Gulen and so forth. I'm just saying that, and whoever put the curve in the Ben Gurion pipeline never saw the project with the nuclear weapons, right? And the boring machine company and so forth. That's going to be a straight line, much closer to, and act also as a barrier when it's all said and done to Egypt. It'll be
we should just wish them well in their endeavors, and we should check out of there and just not be involved.
Yeah, I agree with that. But what I'm saying is, let's not make Ukraine Israel too.
Yeah.
Right. We're dumping billions now into trying to create, to fashion a second homeland, right? Which isn't really our business. And it's really a Christian country to begin with. And it's not there. Well, there's another. There you go. That's
a little straighter. Zoomed out a little more. Yeah. Uh-huh.
But I say that's another proposed one. But I really think you got to go over to the end of Gaza now. And we said that we thought that wherever the Ben Gurion pipeline was, that would be the bifurcation point of Gaza. And in Braverman Prophecy, we say it's halfway through the Gaza. But with Bibi and Milchan, with these guys that all did the Israeli bomb and everything, it's more over to all the way to the Egyptian border here, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
As a border, and that way we can take everybody that lived in Gaza and they can go work on it in the desert, way, way, way away from Tel Aviv, and you watch this second Nakba with all these youth are going to be put to work. They're first going to be put to work in Saudi Arabia on the Trans-Arabian pipeline. Remember, they did this in the first Nakba. Everybody went to Kuwait, right? In this Nakba is there you go. Now
No,
there,
you got them both there. You got the one with the curve, and then the one that's like, all right, let's just go straight through Gaza schmaza. Go for
yes,
it. You know.
yes,
That's
yes,
the
and
darker
that
blue.
and building and building around Gaza. This is why the whole Trump hotel thing is a smokescreen. You know, when he did all the Trump dance and they made Trump casinos and made it the new strip, that was to inflame people onto a fake idea, right? That was to inflame the Gazans on this fake idea, this Trump, Trump Gaza thing. It's going to be an industrial, and there'll be some nice places for the, Vinmans to live, to watch the ships come and go. This could be a commerce center. The reason you got oil and gas, right? This is going to be a Houston. This is going to look like Panama City in Panama. This is going to be a modern city that will be there, but it's also going to be a working city. It's not going to be just King KBS's playground on the Red Sea. It's going to be a working city, I predict, when it's all said and done. Why? Because the Palestinians have to do something. You got to put the Palestinians to work. Otherwise, idle mind is the devil's workshop.
Yeah.
So we'll go to the next comment. Sorry, each one of these comments is
while we're here, while we're in this part of the world, it makes me a story I wanted to ask you about was the helicopter crash. This was a couple weeks ago. I keep forgetting to ask. The helicopter crash in New York with the gentleman from Spain and his family, the Siemens CEO. As tragic as that was, I do want to sort of dive into it just a little because, when I hear Siemens, I think Stuxnet because it was the Siemens technology or the Siemens software combined with a Siemens control, like a control mechanism center, the 8200, a Siemens 8200, something or other. But then there was also this Siemens 7 software. I don't know if that's, I'll look for the exact name, but that's how Stuxnet worked, and that's how the Mossad had access to a Iranian nuclear facility that was offline. How are you, if it's offline, how are you going to get your worm, get your virus in there? And it's because they had, the triple backdoor to Siemens. And so I was just, as I was diving into that, and, you were in that space, if I'm not mistaken, back in your old career in Silicon Valley. And it was just like, and I noticed like Siemens didn't make software after that version. They had like 4 or 5 different software upgrades. And that was like the one that did Stuxnet was their last time in the software space. They seem like maybe they've been crowded out or obsoleted by other more advanced companies, or maybe they were just like, well, the Mossad has used us for as much as it can at this point. Let's get out of the software business. But I don't know, any comments on that? That was, just lines of research I had.
He was South America Siemens, correct?
He was Spain, I believe. The guy who got, he was Spain.
Spanish speaking. Yeah. I don't know what to make of the whole Siemens thing with the crash. It's so hard to know everything, all things, all people. I looked at the crash. It definitely looked like an ability. Somebody thought that it was a rogue agent. Somebody convinced somebody that, hey, we got to knock this out of the sky. I know they have the ability to take the controller of the thing and flip it. And I think that's what happened.
Well, Siemens technology spinning out of control is, as I read into the story, I'm like, oh, Siemens, something Siemens spinning out of control. Well, there's Stuxnet, which, that's how they got those to spin out of, is somebody sending a message? I don't know. We never know. But
the whole idea of office automation, factory automation, right, with these Siemens controllers, you're right. They're used everywhere. My dad used Alan Bradley a lot. But at that time, he did these in PLCs, industrial PLCs. They're used for everything. So you basically hack into any SCADA systems. But where the Mossad really wants to focus is SCADA systems that are doing power plants or doing, this is the Homer Simpson thing where you're looking at red, green, and blue lights, and Homer only needs to stop eating his tuna fish sandwich when he sees a red light. Otherwise, he's just sitting there playing crossword puzzles and eating his tuna fish sandwich, right? So that's where the Stuxnet thing occurred. And remember General Cartwright, the uncle of the uncle of Peter Strzok again. Again, this is, you follow the same people that do the bombings. They're the same people who do the cyber hacks. They're the same people who do the bio attacks, right? It's all from the old Soviet Union. All this stuff is from the old Soviet Union, right?
Yep.
Repurposed.
Absolutely. So I'll continue. I think
we just need to do more studies. As there's Rafsam Johnny, right? Or what's his face? We just need to do more citizen journalism on this stuff.
I'm going to scroll up and just pick a random one here and get going back to comments. Tanya Chutkin, also a Boys Schiller Flexner alumni like Hunter Biden. We were talking about Tanya Chutkin earlier.
The law firm, yeah.
Yep. Let's see. Rudy Contreras. Thank you, Dave. Yeah, there's our FISA judge. Is so important. Scott Klotzworthy finger banging the rocket of the launch pad suggests an intimate relationship. Of course. Yep. G Dub Jr. with his paper airplane painting. He read the kid's book upside down. He couldn't even get that right. Oh, yeah. The I Pet Goat.
And it probably, continuity of government probably already was in effect. And there was a 5-person, was it Sudanese? Again, Kofor Black's basically house staff, but they acted like they were reporters, and they acted like they were trying to assassinate Trump in Longboat Key, wherever I went to Longboat Key, and they'd taken down that facility where the 9/11 facility. He moved to Sarasota later in the day, but the assassination attempt early in the morning basically let Cheney and George Bush Sr., who stayed the night at the White House on 9/11, right? Let them basically start running the whole thing, the clockwork. And by the time this happened, the clock was already going on continuity of government, right? They were already running the planes and everything. What they're trying to do is create this is what's his face? What was the guy's name? Morelli.
It looks like Blinken, but
Morelli, CIA guy. Morelli saying this is all acting. This is all show acting. Like, oh, this is when we're first finding out about it. No, the Sudanese assassins that morning at Longboat Key at 7:00 in the morning, before they went over to Sarasota, is when the George Bush Sr. and Dick Cheney started going. And the person who does the Secret Service person who did Butler, Cheadle is also there in the White House with them and running this whole thing through the Secret Service, encrypted communications. But this all, they're well on their way to Offutt Air Force Base for the head of Stratcom. Again, missile and space defense. Stratcom in Nebraska is where you take the president when he punches the buttons for nuclear missiles interchange. Again, when you run this out of Stratcom, which is the strategic command, none of the other services see this stuff. You can run it all out of Stratcom. Nobody ever see any records here. You run 9/11. You can run the whole 9/11 operation through Stratcom if you want. I think it was run through PTEC, but we can argue about that later on.
Mark, yeah.
I just wondered if it had connection more to the State Department than the military, but it looks.
I agree with the State Department. Yes, I agree that it would have been run out of the State Department. And there's a special attaché. They have all these State Department attachés on the battlefield. I talked to a lot of people when I was Navy commanders and so forth about Flynn, and they said the State Department basically runs and shapes the battle. It's the State Department that says yes, no on battle plans. So very, very powerful battlefield presence with the State Department.
Was that linked to the Mumbai Taj Hotel attacks in 2008? What were we talking about that would have been linked to that? Maybe the Khobar Tower?
Well, the network, the Haqqani network certainly was. The Pakistani named Ibrahim, who had bombed. And you remember when I went with Rich Sang to Chicago in 2017? You probably don't. But Rich wore those kind of rose-colored glasses, but he didn't see the world through rose-colored glasses. He saw the world for, hey, there's terrorists all over here in North Chicago. And everyone said we made it up. Guess who just extradited the key guy in North Chicago where Rich and I were? India just extradited him. I was down at LAX when they did it. So this network has been in place. Remember, we had talked about Amjad Awan running this with BCCI, and I can't remember what the Muzaffar Awan was the guy in Pontiac that we were following as well. So there is a network. JD Vance is not on the wrong track here. There is a network that's been infiltrated into our major cities, as well as they have these training camps as well. We covered it in 2017, 2018.
Absolutely. Andy McCabe was in charge of evidence collection and preservation.
At Oklahoma City. That's his first job, is make sure we have the surveillance tape of the two guys in the Ryder truck. What was Andy's first job? Because Andy came out of St. Louis, remember? Andy's first job at FBI lab was the surveillance tape of KC bombers, and they lost it. That's where they had John Doe number 2, who was the last guy in the truck. 23 different people saw John Doe number 2, right? But Andy lost the tape.
Let's see. The bank collapse in Europe caused a lot of flack, including the Boys Town Bank. I think the Franklin name included the whole meltdown.
Oh, interesting. Carol, great.
Franklin Bank scandal is different. Includes mega founding father Tisch, where New York filmmaker is an alumni of Tisch Film School, NYU, founded by Albert Gallatin. Of course,
this is what I was thinking too. Was the Franklin Bank scandal that was run by Larry Holmes? Remember, he wasn't the Larry Holmes that had the great left jab and the right cross. It was the guy who would sang to Nick Bryant. Interesting.
Not to be confused with John Holmes.
No, not that guy. Not John Holmes either. But this guy sang for Reagan at the Republican National Convention. He ran that bank, savings and loan, and they had done all the money laundering for all the operations in Nebraska that they were running. I'm sure it was all just vaccine testing. They were going to go to war. They knew they had already done Iraq won. And why did they stay 100 miles out? Storm and Norman. McVeigh was there with Storm and Norman, by the way. Why did they stay 100 miles out? Because they knew that Rumsfeld had given anthrax and the kind that can be launched with a medium range missile. They knew that they had given it to him. They knew that there were going to be Americans coming home in body bags, and they knew they didn't have a vaccine. Where are you going to find a willing supply of young men that volunteer constantly for whatever you want to poke them with? And that is
U.S. military.
The U.S. military, but also young boys, if you want to watch it over time.
Oh, sorry, Boys Town. Yeah, that's where Boys Town.
You want to see the long-term effects, you have Boys Town. That's why Nick Jacobs had 72 PhDs in virology. What do you need 72 PhDs in virology? You only need one school nurse, really, right? If you're just doing the regular toxoid, vaccine, that's why. And then he moves the whole operation to Winburn, and that's where 9/11 happens with anthrax. Interesting. There's no connection between Nick Jacobs and Omaha and Boys Town with all the vaccinologists moving to the spot in Winburn where Flight 93 happens to land, where we find anthrax. Isn't that a little coincidental?
Yeah, I mean, I wonder why they pulled that part of the plan and why they went with Bruce Ivins later. Like, why didn't they just keep going? Why?
The reason why, and this was told to me, Hopsker. Original plan was that, and Madsen also a little bit. The original plan was 6 crop dusters. They trained for this. They flew in formation. There were 5, or there were going to be 6 crop dusters
at a parade, maybe Thanksgiving parade or something like that.
The Macy's parade was talked about as a potential target, to cause mass panic. But the problem with mass panic, where crowds are being sprayed, and then you tell the crowds they're being sprayed, you don't know how that's going to turn out. There's an uncontrollability there, right? And then they decided to go back to the Raytheon plan, which was we'll have because Dov Zakheim said, hey, wait a minute. This is where Wayne Madsen told me Systems Planning Corporation and the autopilot we'll just run 2 planes into the building. We can auto demo the buildings. That will create the mass formation psychosis, but we won't have a lot of death. They didn't think that the firefighters were going to go in so aggressively. They didn't think everybody was going to go in so aggressively. They thought everybody would stay out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the big backfire, is when all the firefighters went in so aggressively. But then we'll have this sideshow with Danny Rothschild out there with Nick Jacobs in Winburn, and then they'll discover the anthrax, and then quietly we'll say the anthrax start continuity of government, and then that'll allow Cheney to walk away from the bioweapons convention, and we could start gain of function. We can call the Erasmus lab and have them, which they were already doing through the Dutch Ministry of Health. They were already doing gain of function with Van der Ebb, but that's beside the point. But now we can have a legitimate company named Erasmus Lab start doing gain of function on anthrax again, right?
Mm-hmm.
As soon as we know that anthrax is being used against us, we now can make the phone call and have Rotterdam start working on anthrax again. So they had to have some trigger. They had to have some anthrax trigger to start doing the gain of function again. And so they decided to do it as
it was the trigger. It did.
It was the trigger. But my point is that they had to do a shift. They had to do a bait and switch. Let's go from the buildings coming down, which is not a continuity of government event, a few people stealing a plane and hijacking a plane. We'd had a whole bunch of hijackings in the 50s and 60s to Cuba. That's not a continuity of government event,
Mm-hmm.
but it's an emotional event, right? For the American people to see they're watching a controlled demolition, but they're being told it was because the planes hit the building.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's caused the mass formation psychosis. And then they did anthrax over on the side in Pennsylvania.
But then the anthrax letters and stuff was like,
well,
what wasn't good about Pennsylvania, or like what didn't the field in Pennsylvania give you that you had to send these letters and do the whole Bruce Ivans?
Well, because what they originally tried to do was say Bruce Ivans was the one who had secreted the aerosolizing agent, which was this sodium, the sodium or silicon dioxide agent. Remember, Ken Allebeck was working with the silicon dioxide agent, and they were going to say that it was Bruce Ivans that gave that to the Iraqis, and that's how Saddam Hussein got the aerosolizing agent. Well, they just never could pin it on him. They had seen a Bavarian there. They were trying to pin it on them. They were trying to pin it on Ivans, and Ivans never went there. Ivans only had the flask that could not be aerosolizable. And so they dropped some hints. McCain went on, Johnny Carson dropped some hints that Saddam Hussein had gotten Fort Detrick. They introduced a couple of spies into Fort Detrick. They kept working on this. Bruce Ivans is the one who sold the silicon dioxide, the sand aerosolizing agent, and it never took because Ivans didn't go there. And that's why it took so long. What was it, 8 years before they finally got Ivans?
Was it the Todd Beamer, let's roll, disrupted that? This is the flight that supposedly is disrupted. Did that maybe?
Todd Beamer was the guy who took out he would have been with the group that took out the terrorists and why it crashed.
Was action, was that like, did they thwart something there that, there was something else involved?
It was a smaller plane. I think it was a smaller plane. I think there was a gypsy switch around somewhere in Ohio. I don't know. Cleveland is, a lot of people say that's where the gypsy switch happened, but it was a smaller plane, more hideable plane. And then I think it shot down. Cheney authorized it to be shot down. But boy, they hit it with something like a railgun, though, because it shredded it. I mean, the pieces are this big, that's not how planes look at any plane thing, right? It doesn't go into the ground at all. It smashes, the fuselage breaks, one wing goes one direction, maybe the wings clip off if they hit trees, and then you have the fuselage, but everything's always above ground. This one was completely hidden. So I do think there was a plane there. A lot of people don't think there was ever a plane. It was just a missile. And I think it was a smaller plane, but they even tried. We went to Somerset. We interviewed all the people that were on the crew, the first responders, and they said, Yeah, they found all this mail from because it was carrying that flight 93 was carrying U.S. mail, and we found all this mail back in Somerset, proving that the flight happened there. The only problem is that meant the fuselage was already blown up before it got to Shanksville, which is like 20 miles away. So now, how did the mail get out? There was an obvious need to try to say that this plane actually was there. And the Somerset Mail, I almost thought about writing a book on Somerset Mail. It proves that it was a false flag, right? It proves that it was some other kind of drone plane that was shot down. And then they buried it quickly. They expected it, and it was buried quickly. It was 70 feet of earth that they had buried it. Somehow they found the passport down at the bottom of the 70 feet, and somehow they found the driver's license in perfect condition by a tree 200 yards away. I mean, it was just a very sloppily done deal.
Here's my conspiracy theory on the mail. Fire Force's brief shutdown of Newark Airport, September 10th, 2001. So this was in the mail room. This was a fire in the mail room at Newark Airport the day before 9/11. So it's like, did they just grab some of the mail? I mean, who grabbed the mail and drove it?
I should have wrote the book Somerset Mail. I should have wrote the book Somerset Mail, because Somerset Mail is one of those things. Once you know about the Somerset Mail, everything, it's sort of like Sam Cohen saying an air blast never could take out a steel beam, no matter how much oil and how much fertilizer. It's just one of those things, or the controlled demolition of Building 7, where it just totally eliminates the false narrative. You just destroy. Somerset Mail destroys the whole narrative that was where Flight 93 ended. I think Flight 93 probably landed in Cleveland. There was another one that went over Piketon. And I might have my two flights mixed up. I thought the one that hit the Pentagon was in Piketon. And again, that's an area where if you threaten a weapons of mass destruction area, all truth goes out the window. I'm allowed to now Smith Munt this thing, and I'm allowed to send a missile from a slow-moving missile. I'm allowed to send a Tomahawk missile or whatever into the Pentagon. Flight 93 went to Cleveland, Akron area, and then the one in Washington, D.C., Flight 77, turns around in Piketon. But as soon as Flight 77 threatens Piketon, now I can land the plane. I can take over the plane. That's the whole idea of the automatic pilot and SPC. I can land it there, kill everybody that comes off the plane, right? And then send the missile. And then on the, because everything's grounded at this point, on the radar, I can present any kind of silhouette that I want. But if you go to the Pentagon, and again, I can't count how many times I've been to the Pentagon, there's a missile hole. It's not a plane hole, right? So you just have to wonder, if they use the missile for the Pentagon, why wouldn't they use a missile here for the Cleveland route, right? So that, when I'm shooting people down, I'm not leaving bodies. Somerset Mail gives it all away. How would you have time? How did it get out of the fuselage? Why didn't it land at the crash site? How is it in Somerset, 20 miles away? Tell me, explain that to me. And we interviewed people eye to eye like this, right? Who picked up the mail. This guy that we talked to, who was one of the first responders, went around and picked up all and the FBI was going around and interviewing all the people where the mail fell, to hundreds of people. So it's a book in itself. I'll probably go back there and write Somerset Mail.
Absolutely. Here we'll continue on with the comments here. Raskin, chairman of DNC from 1928 to 1932. His tenure was marked by a push to align it with big business, away from its traditionally agrarian populist roots. This direction proved divisive. Okay. Kate, I'm pretty sure that Catholic Charities has a lot of corruption. Definitely pushes Agenda 21. I agree with that. What does Benassi know about Catholics in Action? Catholics in Action, and when did he learn it? I think the Madigan
was a choir boy when he learned it. I'll just leave that question quickly answered.
I think the Madagascar, South Africa idea for territory for civilized Jews is still a great idea. That area needs brain help. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Well, in my visit, I stayed with a Jewish family when I went to Cape Town, and I do think it's a good idea. I think it's a much better. South Africa is one of the few places that would accept Jews during the Nuremberg years and during the World War II years, and yeah, it would be. I don't think Madagascar makes any sense, but I do think South Africa made a lot of sense for a Jewish homeland. Especially if like you give the Boers the Kimberleys and give the Boers the Johannesburg, that area, and then you keep the South. I think it would have made a great Jewish homeland.
Mark is referencing over here Bijan. Remember the Jewish Autonomous Oblast there in
Manchuria?
There are two autonomous. So folks who are always getting mad at Israel, if you want to, diversify yourself, there are actually two Jewish autonomous zones in the world. One is Israel. The other is the Jewish Autonomous Oblast.
Remember what's her name was from there? The girl that was originally supposed to go with Papadopoulos was from that oblast.
They still speak Yiddish there.
Yeah,
fascinating place that and I mean, there's so much there. We'll have to do. Like I've said, we'll have to start our good Mossad, bad Mossad.
Vinova. Who was the first girl that was? But she couldn't. She was gorgeous, but she couldn't speak a lick of English.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave her a wine type name, but she was from the Greek Autonomous Zone in down near Sochi.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, they got a lot of those autonomous zones there in the former Soviet Union, right? But let's see.
Where was the Jewish Autonomous Zone? Where is that located?
In northern Russia, like it's at Siberia.
Right. This one is to the south. The Greek Russian.
Right.
She spoke Greek. She spoke Greek with Papadopoulos. Oh, it's way out there.
It's way out there.
Yeah. Like it was part of on the border of Manchuria.
Look up the Greek Autonomous Zone where they got that Vinova, the first girl that supposedly was the daughter of Putin. They were going to try to, they always try to trigger continuity of government by saying somebody's the daughter of Putin. If it was just some peasant girl or some Russian model or whatever, that wouldn't trigger continuity of government. But it's Putin's daughter. And I remember they went with Putin's daughter for a while. That was MI6 and Richard Dearlove. They were pushing Putin's daughter for a while in order to
There's the Greek Autonomous District, Azov, Black Sea, near the Azov Black Sea. No?
Wow, that's near the Ukraine. Wow.
Yeah. That makes sense, because I mean the Greeks wouldn't have gotten that far into Russia, any of them who
just
made
do a search just for fun.
Yeah.
Just do a search on George Papadopoulos and then Putin's daughter. And then the name, and do an image search, and her name's like Villanova or Venosa or some varietal grape that begins with V.
Putin's niece.
Was it Putin's niece?
Putin's niece.
Because they had to trigger continuity of government. Remember, in order to run the operation on Trump, they had to trigger continuity of government.
Let's see here. This is Russia's middleman who introduced Trump campaign official to Putin's niece and offered dirt on Hillary is London-based European Union expert who trains diplomats. This is the one, right? Joseph Mitsud.
Yeah, Joseph Mitsud, yeah.
London-based former Maltese diplomat has been identified as Russia's conduit to the Trump campaign.
And it was Mitsud's job to come up with the supermodel, right? He had this thing, this cockamamie degree program for all, and he would go around and visit like this creep all around all the Mediterranean universities. Remember, and he was model hunting on his trip around the Mediterranean. I can't remember what he called his little school. But he got this one gal from Ukraine, like you're talking here. It was the first one before what the one they ended up with. Joseph Schmitz went with the one that worked at his law firm. The Joseph Schmitz on the spy that was on the.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't Lee Stranahan go deep into all of this?
Oh yeah.
He was.
He went into Lee went into the one that met with Papa.
Carter Page.
Paul Manafort.
Yeah.
The Russian that met with Paul Manafort, that also had to trigger continuity of government. All these things have to trigger continuity of government, right? In order to have extraordinary powers and extraordinary, in order to engage the assassination squad, you have to have extraordinary powers. But roll through here a little bit with her.
I don't have this queued up. Yeah.
No, just tell me your name.
I gotta get back to that.
Timothy, if I remember, putting the dossiers together, he died in a plane crash. All the people that were involved in getting the Russian dolls ended up dying in plane crashes.
Vinogradova.
That's right. Vinogradova. I remember it was Vino and then Gradova. Yeah, Vinogradova. Show Vinogradova, because that was the first one that they had, but she just couldn't speak a lick of English. Michael, I shouldn't say this. I'll say it anyway. Michael Carlin was with Papadopoulos and Mangione for weeks and weeks and weeks, filming them. And filmed him even going into prison. Remember, he went into prison for like a day, right? And I won't say anything else more, but Michael can't talk about it. But I didn't want to pay him. He was like filming this documentary for George Papadopoulos, and then all of a sudden at the end, they're like, "Oh, well, we were the stars. You should pay us." I'm like, "No, I'm doing your movie, and I'm spending my money." Boy, Michael will be mad at me for saying.
I don't know. I don't know if I'm getting any Vinogradova pictures. It's all saying how mysterious she was. I'm definitely in the articles and everything here. I'm not sure I'm going to grab a picture.
I think that looks like Vinogradova sitting on his lap right there. I don't think that looks like Mangione. That to me looks like.
You think that was her on his lap? Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
I think that was Vinogradova.
Okay.
But I have a picture of her in her Russian military GRU uniform. I mean, she was right out of Mike Flynn going to GRU headquarters. Remember when Mike Flynn went to GRU headquarters, he was picking out the Russian dolls, and then they had that was sort of like the first round of Miss Universe, and then the second round of Miss Universe was with Dearlove and Halper and all of them at Cambridge. Remember, they were going to go through. Dearlove ran the London liaison office for CIA for MI6, right? So they all went up to Cambridge to make it look like a book signing for Lakova. Look, remember Lakova? She was the one who was kind of like the Russian doll primper. She was getting all the Russian dolls to go to be injected with Mike Flynn into the Trump campaign. Lakova, and Lakova supposedly gave Mike Flynn a sexy, racy, erotic, electric love or something. It was to some Greek or some German statue of these, lovers in the heat of passion. And Stalin had given that electrosure. I can't even remember what it was called. Telefunken electrosure or something like that. Stalin had given that to a 14-year-old when he was in the Soviet army, and she had gotten that Stalin postcard out of the Russian archives to show her bona fides to Mike Flynn that she really was the Russian doll keeper. She was the Russian doll primper in Cambridge, right? But Vinogradova didn't even make it to Cambridge, I don't think.
You got to know a little bit of English, not too much, just a little bit, enough to. I'm just gonna do a few more comments here. Kofor Black is in charge of getting bad guys later at Burisma. Yes, the letters were to scare the public into going into Iraq, I think. Okay,
which letters?
The anthrax letters. Part of
yeah.
Politicians in the MSM.
Yeah, that's right. Because at that point we had no casus belli to go into Iraq.
Right.
We only had a casus belli to go into Afghanistan to get Osama bin Laden. That's right. The anthrax was for Iraq. Yes.
Anthrax Media National Enquirer had the evidence room cleaned out. Okay.
We visited there. We went there. I went there with a couple of Michigan researchers, as a matter of fact. The American Media Building. We went there.
Attorney Mark Zaid and Rockefeller buddy Merrill Nass were in Bruce Ivins' operation with Nancy Haywood. KKG Journal, the Kappa Kappa Gamma Journal at University of North Carolina, is where Nancy Messonnier lands after the CDC resignation.
Didn't they get that Mark Zaid down in Disney World that he liked to pick up the little kids at Disney World? Was
that lawyer guy?
Yeah, I'm just thinking.
I never saw that, but maybe. I'm sure it's out there.
I'm just asking. It just seemed like.
Well, Merrill Nass was certainly run at Bruce Ivins on three different occasions when Bruce Ivins was going to different things, and they were really trying to get Bruce Ivins introduced to somebody who they could make the case like a curveball or some kind of Iraqi agent where they could say, "Oh, Ivins was at this conference," and then pass the facts that the Bruce Ivins' weak Achilles' heel was he liked to help the femme fatale. He liked the up and coming women in science who had been traditionally discriminated against. He felt women were every bit as capable, if not more so, than men. And he was helping these various women at these various Ivy League institutions in virology. So the problem with the FBI's case is here's Bruce Ivins constantly being the good guy. Constantly, not in a sexual way at all, but in a just, hey, here's information, here's how anthrax works, here's how we're trying to do the vaccine, et cetera, et cetera. He did this with Merrill Nass. He did this with a girl at Dartmouth. He did this with a girl at Cornell. He did this with a girl at Yale. I think he had a Harvard girl that he was trying to help. He's trying to help these girls that were in the Nancy Messonnier network that were supposedly coming out of the woodwork. The thing that was linking all these women approaching Bruce Ivins was, hey, I've got a UNC. Well, we went to remember when I knocked on the door of the sororities and said, Nancy Messonnier here, but I went to Chapel Hill for this one. And, but they were all saying, oh, my sorority sister said you helped her. The one at Brown would say, oh, my sorority sister at Harvard said you helped. I can't remember where Nancy Messonnier went to, if it was undergrad. But that was the come on to Bruce Ivins. That was how they all knew to contact him. And all the fake emails that he was using, right? They had the FBI case said there was 8 different. He had a different fake email for communicating with each of these different girls to help them because you weren't allowed to use your Fort Detrick email for things that were off book. But all of his communications, and again, I can't count how many times we went to Fort Detrick. I mean, we did, how many charrettes did we do up there with Andy and so forth?
Mm-hmm.
But all of them were innocuous. All of them were to help these various different girls. And that's why he had the 8 different things. There's no email. There's no smoking gun email, which says this is how you aerosolize anthrax. The reason Bruce Ivins didn't know how to aerosolize anthrax. Bruce Ivins did not know how to aerosolize anthrax. That's why he never told any of the girls how to aerosolize anthrax. The only person who knew how to do that was Sina Bavari.
Mm-hmm.
Sina Bavari, who was later the person who said we're going to have a coronavirus outbreak in 2019 in his white paper in 2018. The only person who knew how to do that was Sina Bavari. Isn't it interesting? He writes the thing with Benassi. He writes the paper with Virginia Benassi, Disease X white paper, the research and development white paper. Isn't it interesting how he writes that in 2018 with Virginia Benassi? Is it really Virginia Benassi? No, it's NATO and it's the Wellcome Trust and it's Jeremy Farrar and the intelligence organizations and the intelligence Benassis that are writing that white paper, which says we're going to have a coronavirus in the next year, right? Mm-hmm. That's why we can never locate Virginia Benassi. But Sina Bavari was the key person at Fort Detrick, if you remember, that shut down Fort Detrick in August when we had the lab leak.
Yep.
This is the important connection. I wrote Bavari 911. This is the important connection between Sina Bavari and coronavirus. There's 2 towers in my Bavari, and Andy did the cover. There's 2 towers. One is anthrax, right? Andy did the artwork, and coronavirus. And Sina Bavari is the linkage between the 2.
Mm-hmm. I can say also just on that story, I didn't realize Nancy Messonnier had gone to the Gilling School at North Carolina, and so that's almost obviously like, hey, Nancy, you're gonna have to go over here and take care of this Ralph Barrick situation. This Ralph Barrick thing has gotten way out of hand. You know, we've got all this.
Who was the gal that testified against and made up all that stuff about
Ivins? Nancy Haygood? Right, she's at North Carolina. She was in North Carolina. And then, you know, Ralph Barrick, just, you know, beginning of the coronavirus, everybody was all over Ralph Barrick and all of his, you know, gain of function coronavirus work down there at the University of North Carolina. And so them sending Nancy Messonnier in June of 2022 to become the new dean of the Gilling School is like, you know, calling in the big guns to take care of the Barrick situation.
And Sina Bavari is the one who had the Charlie's Angels of all the girls of the bioweapons. All these girls that ended up testifying against Bruce Ivins for helping them get their PhDs, they all went to work for Sina Bavari in his Charlie's Angels that he brought in to U.S. Amherst. So Sina Bavari took credit and got all the development and reaped all the rewards with all these Charlie's Angels that came and worked for Sina Bavari. So they fucked him over in the worst possible way. He's the best guy in ever.
It's so
Ivins, and they just screwed him so ruthlessly, and that was all run by Rumsfeld. It still eats at me, and I wonder how I sleep at night not working on that case round the clock. That one really gets me.
Well, if Cash Patel and Dan Bongino have an extra minute, you know, if anybody can send this show to Cash or Dan here today, they've got all these agents doing all this stuff. You know, maybe an agent or two could be siphoned off to the Amerithrax case.
Well, wait a minute. Now, Domino's Pizza, there's a lot of people being swatted with Domino's Pizza. We gotta devote a lot of resources into that. Or Tesla tagging is out of control. We gotta, you know, send 1,000 agents for that. You know.
Well, they can pull this Amerithrax out of the vault and get working on this too, because this is not a closed case in the eyes of many. That's for sure.
Total setup, and Bruce Ivins. I talked to a lot of people who knew him, and just the nicest man in the world, and just so Christian in his approach to these young ladies. No sexual overtones whatsoever. They tried to make it in when they did the made-for-TV movie. They tried to make it into sexual overtones. That was completely untrue, right? He one woman asked for alcohol as a gift, so that's when he went to the Cornell soccer game. He brought her the alcoholic gift after he made sure that she was 21, right? After he made sure that she was of drinking age. If he would have been some creepy guy trying to do some sexual liaison, and how did he get from Ithaca all the way down to Fort Detrick, right? He had to
drive. Yeah, no, it's crazy.
12 hours. They had, you know, he had such a crazy thing that they had him do, and that's another thing in their case that didn't make any sense.
His poor family.
But he made sure that the girl was 21 before he gave her the present when he watched the Cornell soccer game, and he was he was responding. It was the worst form of entrapment possible. They tried to test his morality, Peter Strzok. They tried to test his morality at every turn, and he was always the perfect guy, right? He was always the perfect guy, going out of his way to help these aspiring women. And Nancy Haygood, you've got to take that to your grave. I saw the lights, I saw the pearly gates, and I said to my Lord and Savior, I'm ready. I have nothing hard on my heart, right? I'm ready. But man, can you imagine her white moment, you know, a white cloudy moment? That has got to be Nancy, go to Cash Patel today, right? Get this off your heart. You don't want that on your heart when you're facing your maker. I just think that is going to be straight to hell for her. I just cannot even imagine what she did to Bruce Ivins is criminal.
Well, what they did to America, in the sense, also, you know.
It's every man, woman, and child. Also,
Cash Patel, please, you know, reopen Amerithrax. Cash, do it for us.
I've told the story before, but she ran the monkey lab when I took my biochem courses, master's courses at Oregon Graduate Institute. Nancy ran the monkey lab where they were focused. Yes, she did.
Do you still think, George? Do you still think Lev Parnas was the Amerithrax letter sender? I didn't know. That you
Yes.
said that.
Or Fruman, one of the two. Just go to the locations. Again, this is where you go to the locations, you start talking to people. Go to the locations and just see how it was all up and down. It started in Boca Raton, I think. And just, you know, it's Lev Parnas just being a lazy ass and not wanting to drive very far to all these different places that are in the anthrax bombings.
Natalia Veselina debriefed with McCabe at dinner. Interesting. Lakova was the one that raised the red flag for Steph Halper and Sir Andrew Wood. Lakova used Steve Bliss as lawyer name as Devin Nunez and Bob Malone.
She's Stephen Biss is a CIA lawyer, but she didn't raise any flags. She was the person who was supposed to be herding all these Russian dolls to be injected into the Trump campaign. I mean, it's pure, plain and simple.
Ralph Barrick at University of North Carolina, off the rails with Wuhan Lab and Bat Lady with EcoHealth Alliance, Disease X author Peter Daszak.
No CM technology. He was the one who was going to say, hey, how the hell did the fern cleavage site get in there? There's going to be marks left, you know, from the surgery. No, Ralph Barrick said, I've got no CM technology. You won't see the surgical marks.
I forgot Nancy Massonier was Rod Rosenstein's sister.
Yep. And that was the whole idea of like inject the Russian dolls into the Trump campaign.
Tugwell Mueller, Specialty Metals, mailbox in Princeton, New Jersey, was a bad look. Yep. Right where the letters came from.
And see, the FBI and Mueller also had a Charlie's Angels complex because he went to Princeton, right? He would take his most promising, acolytes and so forth, these women, and he would put them in the various Ivy League universities. And he loved that Ivy League thing. His dad was Princeton, right? And he was Princeton. And somehow he was an elite over there on Gibson Island. And he didn't, all the waiters were still black, right? Even, you could be a chief justice of the Supreme Court, Justice Marshall, but on Gibson Island, you're still serving me my peach cobbler, right? That was that throwback America, elitist America, the Symington white tablecloth, black waiter world that he lived in. And Princeton gave him that feeling, right? So all the women he recruited for the takedown of Bruce Ivins all came from that Ivy League background.
Fascinating stuff. Yeah, New Jersey, Princeton, New Jersey, home of
and the fact that the letter came from there, for the anthrax. I mean, I wonder if Bob Mueller mailed it himself. It's really pretty hard to. It's right across the street, and I lived in Princeton for a while. I know exactly where the mailbox is, and the whole Saudi with Turkey Al Faisal was groomed there in Princeton. David Petraeus had the house of all the Muslim kids for the elitist for the Saudi intelligence training in the 90s when he was professor there. All that right in there in Princeton, that whole generational thing where they were going to train the next round of Saudi intel operatives was going to be in Princeton, right? That's why they had the school right next to Princeton. Turkey Al Faisal, Princeton. Yeah, there you go. All 9/11 too. All 9/11. All those guys trained, all those Saudi princes that were trained at Princeton all ended up running 9/11. All those ones that were trained by David Petraeus, and when he was professor there, all of them ended up being the guys running 9/11.
Yep. We'll have to read Hopsicker's book here. Mark and I are going to get started doing some book readings and stuff. So we'll start with Hopsicker's book and so many others. There's a lot there. But yeah, great. We've gone well over 2 hours here again. Thank you all for being here.
Seems like 10 minutes.
I know, right? I'll put the Pope, the live stream of Pope Francis lying in St. Peter's Basilica here for us to watch as we talked about the Pope in the first half of the show. For folks who might have missed the first half of the show, we did discuss a lot of historical aspects and current events aspects of the Pope of a different color.
Put up Dave's comment about Lawrenceville because I went down to Trenton to the Lawrenceville High School of Turkey Al Faisal. Turkey Al Faisal is important running Saudi intelligence because he's the guy who on the same plane, on his same plane, you've got Cover Black, you've got Osama bin Laden when Osama bin Laden is supposed to be a terrorist leader, right? And you've got Jamal Khashoggi as the supposed journalist that's going to film in country once they get landed, right? I think they land in Kandahar, but what the smaller plane, he can land in smaller places. But then Jamal Khashoggi would run outside, and they'd get Osman, Osama bin Laden, all dressed up, and then get him an AK-47 and have him shoot a few rounds. Then they would all get back into the plane with Turki al-Faisal and fly back to Sudan. Right. So Turki al-Faisal is a really important player in the whole mythology of global war on terror and the whole mythology of Osama bin Laden. And he was cultivated by David Petraeus. He was cultivated by Bob Mueller at Riggs Bank is also really important. I'm sorry, Aaron, to throw this in there, but Riggs Bank and Whitney Webb writes a lot about it, but Riggs Bank's really important because that was the bank also that Gulen used to fund the KLA. So all these banks, Turki al-Faisal and Riggs Bank is the same one that Pinochet used to pay off the Shah. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to pay for the Shah's surgery. So, and Richard Webb, who is Richard Webb III, who I think is Whitney's father. I don't know. He knows an awful lot about Riggs Bank. I'm just saying. So anyway, I don't know any more than that, and she doesn't know any more than that because she, what do they call it? Emancipated herself at 16. But I'm just saying, Richard.
When I paid for my National Geographic subscription, the check went through the Riggs National Bank. So there was National Geographic's bank.
Well, National Geographic, through its network of photographers, ran a lot of CIA agents. That's a network that's like having 1,000 Peter Dukes with have Cameron will travel. Thank you.
And who else?
Go ahead.
Thinking of National Geographic, who else sat on the board of the board of trustees of National Geographic back in the 1960s was old Curtis LeMay.
Oh, really? Wow.
I just happened to
right there
while filming that rare whatever. I just happened to have a picture of the Air Force base behind it.
Yeah. Amazing stuff. So. Well, we will leave it right there. We will.
Yeah, how does Whitney know so much? Richard Webb III is how she knows so much. I'll just leave it at that. But Richard Webb III, there's another Richard Webb III that did the whole Rosenstiel story, and actually said that the Great Gatsby with Scott Fitzgerald actually was the Rosenstiel story. People say it's different people, different bootleggers, but Rosenstiel versus Bronfman's. And what they had to do was same way they got Capone, get the accountant. And that's how we'll take Rosenstiel out of the picture. Right. And so I'm not saying Richard Webb III, or I'm not saying Richard Webb II, or I'm not saying Richard Webb I was the accountant for Rosenstiel, but man, Whitney Webb's books sure make it seem that way. Make it seem that way.
Fascinating stuff. Well, I think we will leave it right there. May Pope Francis rest in peace. Great show, definitely interesting stuff. And we await the assignment of the next Pope, or the election of the next Pope. As Mark was saying earlier, we started the show off way early with the Shoes of the Fisherman. So he said you can watch that movie if you want to get more information on how they elect, how the cardinals all come together to select the Pope. So we awaiting for that news in the days, weeks, months ahead. How long will it take? How long should they usually take to pick a Pope? They can't wait that long, right?
2 weeks.
It can take a while because they do a vote every day. That's what everybody will be standing in St. Peter's Square watching for the fire, and if black smoke comes out of the chimney, then there was no Pope elected, and they'll have to do it again tomorrow. And until finally white smoke comes out of the chimney, then they'll know there's a Pope. So as many days as it takes, and this could be protracted if if you have these MAGA Catholics that want to have a return to traditionalism, accusing, like this current Pope of like stacking the College of Cardinals to predetermine like who's gonna move into the papacy. So it's gonna be interesting.
I think this is going to be more protracted. This is Pope wagering here or Pope handicapping. I think this is going to be 33 days. I think it'll be 33 days.
Okay.
It's normally 2 weeks because they don't want to name a pope right away like it was a conceived notion. But 33 is your number, I think. I'm predicting 33 days until we get a new pope. And I think his last name's going to be close to Benassi, but not quite Benassi.
Because remember, like when we had Pope Paul VI, he's the one who brought in the Vatican II. He dies, and then there's Pope John, who lasts for like a month, and then he dies, and then we get Pope John Paul, who served for a number of years until Ratzinger came along. So, and that was that Pope John was like the last Italian Pope, and then you had the Polish Pope. So that's, I guess, my feeling is whoever Cardinal Vigano, who was this country's whoever he says is good, I'll go with whoever he says should be Pope, just because he's.
Now you had Conclave, which had the transgender Pope. Is this where you go and break the mold, right? And you go with a female Pope. You just say,
wow, that'd be wild, yeah.
We're going to make women in the priesthood now, and we're going to go totally modern. We're going to have a first female Pope. And will it be Kamala Harris?
I think it's going to be that black guy from Gambia. We'll have to say that for the next show, but there's this black guy. He's like from Guinea or Gambia or something. I think they're
pushing him awfully hard.
Yeah, I think it's going to be him.
That Gambian guy, they're pushing hard. I don't know. What did he do that's so significant?
I don't know.
That'll be your
it's all right.
Black Pope. He might be the first black Pope. I expect you to come back with some good information.
I know. I'll reach it. He fought the Marxists. I know that he was anti-Marxist and apparently, was went up against a Marxist regime in his country. So that's good to hear, at least theoretically. But
well, okay, all right. How about Ghana? How's the cat? Yeah,
not too many Catholics in Ghana. No, not so Catholic. More,
no,
the other way.
I could see an African Pope though. That has there ever been an African Pope?
No,
I don't
think. God, yeah, that's why I think it's gonna. Now is the time for that. They're all about doing the New Age thing, and so we'll see where they go. But
where was Desmond Tutu from? Wasn't Desmond Tutu
South Africa?
Yeah.
South Africa. It could be. He ran. Desmond Tutu ran. He ran the United Nations?
No, he was just an activist guy. I think the United Nations was Kofi Annan. Maybe who you're thinking of. There was a Ghanaian guy. The Ghanaian gentleman who ran the United Nations was Kofi Annan. Probably.
Well, we're going with Shoes of the Fisherman. I would say, I would be interested to see, and it could be very interesting, is to come up with a Chinese Pope. Is there someone, a Pope from these, the underground Catholic Church or the house churches in China, and because that would really be interesting.
Melania could be the first woman Pope.
Wouldn't that be something? Yeah. Well, we'll stop making guesses here and we will close it out. So thank you, George, for being here. Folks can support George at buymeacoffee.com and substack.com. And as far as supporting neighborhood news, we're going to have a citizen journalism camp here in August. So if you want to support us, that's the first big chance is to come and travel up
and
here.
Clean out your storage units and all your friends' storage units for anything planes, trains, and automobiles that's die cast, not aluminum, but like has a heavy nickel in it component that is planes, trains, and automobiles. Bring that to the jamboree.
We'll get some shows going soon here where we can move around the studio and show the collectibles and
in
collectibles.
Good condition.
Yeah,
in good condition. Yeah.
So there you have it, and we'll play it out from here. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, George. Saturday night. Not actually sure about Saturday night yet. We might have to check our schedules and everything, but we'll be coming back at you. The shows will be continuing and more to come from Neighborhood News and George Webb soon. So thanks for everyone being here. Thank you, George, Mark.
Thanks, George.
Yep.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Thanks,
Take
Mark.
care. See you. Bye-bye.
See you next trip.
Please consider supporting George Webb at substack.com for $8 a month.